pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. My name is Dave Atkins, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. All meetings are recorded by the Westwood Media Center, and if there's anyone else in the audience who would like to record this meeting, please let us know so that everyone is aware. As a reminder, please turn off your cell phones. The agenda is available at the back of the room, and the meeting will follow the order on the agenda. Be civil, all people will be treated respectfully. The format of this meeting is that when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments, board members will ask questions of the applicant, and then the public will be given an opportunity to comment. When it is time for the public comment period, the chairman will call those wishing to speak to the podium. Once at the podium, please identify yourself by stating your name and address for the record. All comments and questions shall be directed through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. I'd just like to remind everyone when you do speak to speak into the microphone and to identify yourself so that as the meeting is being recorded, this will be captured. And sometimes when people talk spontaneously from the audience, you can't hear it when you watch it later. And these meetings are all recorded, broadcast on Westwood Media Center, local cable channels. You saw the sign out there perhaps. And they're also available on YouTube, so you can go back and watch every minute of a 4 or 5 hour long meeting, which we will not be doing tonight. So, first of all, Abby, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, 200 University Ave, the EIDR application, that applicant requested you postpone or continue without discussion that hearing to your next meeting on Tuesday, September 25th. They'd like more time to update their plans to incorporate the parking lot changes that we suggested. So you should vote to continue that request.
If there are no objections, I'd like to just take that out of order and just go ahead and if there's a motion to postpone that, if someone would like to make that motion.
I'll move we postpone that meeting until Tuesday, September 25th at Carvey Street location?
Yep, 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So that is postponed until Tuesday, September 25th at this same location at 7 p.m. The first item on the agenda is Morgan Farm Estates, Open Space, Residential District, Environmental Impact Design Review, Definitive Subdivision Minor Modification, a request to modify previously approved retaining wall and grading changes for earth movement at Lot 10 on Morgan Farm Road. This was continued from our August 7th meeting. Abby, do you have any updates? I know at that meeting we sent people back to sort out some issues.
Yes, sorry I missed your last meeting. But the application is before you, rightfully before you. It is a request for a modification, and it's here before as a minor modification. This is the Morgan Farms Estates was approved on the open space residential development bylaw, so it was a subdivision and an EIDR, environmental impact design review. And in that, this is the only project we have under that type of approval. So it's a little bit different than what you've seen before in the past. But anytime there's any changes to the plans, even specific to the grading and the retaining wall, which is what happened here, that triggers a further review by you for a modification to the approved plan. So that's why the building commissioner informed the applicant that it needed to go to the planning board. So that's how it got to you. So the request before you is a minor modification. So you should review it as a modification. So that first question for you is it minor or not? And then you should vote on the applicant's request. It's about the retaining wall and the grading changes on that lot 10.
Okay. Well, would you please
Evening, Lou Petrozzi for Wall Street Development Co-op. As I was here at the last meeting, and this as Abby mentioned, this subdivision was approved under open space residential development. It's the first one that was approved in Westwood. And we've been, each lot has had significant, not so significant, but changes to the contours and changes to the design as the market determines what we need to build out there aesthetically and to enhance the development. In this particular case, we have a lot that, at the back end of the subdivision, as I mentioned previously, we had a significant amount of ledge on this property that required a significant amount of blasting and rock crushing operation. When we got to the point where we were developing this lot, originally this lot was designed to have a walkout basement, at least for a good portion of it. But because of the amount of ledge that was encountered, it was determined that the walkout basement, to create that, would cause a significantly more blasting and excavation. And the original plan called for a 6-foot wall along the back, as you see it depicted on the plan. When we got to the point where we weren't going to do the walkout basement, we tried to address the difference in elevations, because now we're going from a 6-foot wall to probably a 10-foot wall in some instances. So originally it was designed as a 2-tiered wall for, we thought, aesthetic reasons, but from a structural engineer standpoint and a safety issue, it was felt that we should build one continuous wall and provide fencing along the top of the wall. And we have since designed it that way, and that's the way it was submitted for a building permit to the building inspector. And in addition to that, we would, the site is proposed to have a pool located on it, and that in and of itself will require a 4-foot high fence. And most of the people that we've built pools for up there have been surrounding their entire perimeter of the property with the fence rather than isolating it to one section of where the pool would be located. That's pretty much the extent of what the change is. I mean, the house footprint and that has changed, and they all have changed from what was previously proposed on the plan, but that is, I guess, something that is left to discretion of the building inspector. That's really pretty much it. So essentially, we're going from a 6-foot wall to a 10-foot wall. It actually starts in this area here as a 6 or 8-foot wall, and then it jumps up to the back where it's 10, and then it tapers down towards the end to match the contours of the adjacent properties.
Are there any questions from any board members?
I just have a question. The wall, has it been looked at from a structural engineer since you went from the 2-tier to the single?
Before we started construction on it, because we started it as originally as the wall where it was located, it was designed by a structural engineer, inspected by the structural engineer as work progressed, and we'll have a report with photographs to provide evidence to that to the building inspector.
Yeah, did we have any additional comments, Phil, for Beta, or?
Sure.
I'll just give a
Yep.
summary. So,
Thank you.
So Lou allowed us to get out there again to look at the wall. And from what we heard last time at the meeting, it's already been approved by conservation, these changes. And so I think what Lou's talking about in terms of a structural report, that's what we want to make sure it's constructed in accordance. It's a majority of it's already constructed. There's some cap stuff, but
Right, there's finish to be done.
so in general, I think there's nothing adverse impact wise relative to this. Once we receive the as-built and the structural report will be fine.
Lou, who are the, there's, I assume in a butter, one of your properties to the right of
We're
this?
the butters. We haven't built on those two lots.
What about on the other side?
Hale.
Hail on both the back and the side?
Yeah, we conveyed the designated open space from this point forward and along the back to Hale Reservation.
You did some kind of a land?
It was a combination of transactions. One was the open space transaction, and then we did buy a chunk of land on the first phase of the development that benefited both us and Hale.
And in the original plans, was there to be a fence on top of the wall?
You know, we didn't propose a fence originally. You know, at the time, we weren't really thinking about safety, and quite honestly, we didn't know that all of these little details would be reviewable, let's say, under that, under sort of the scrutiny of a site plan decision. So a lot of details, like landscaping details and all those things, those weren't even considered during the original approval process, so no, we didn't consider a fence along the back, but, you know, even now, a 6-foot wall would necessarily, people would want a fence to, you know, for safety reasons. They have a lot of small children.
Yeah, you had mentioned a lot of people do it around the whole perimeter with
Yeah.
a pool.
Yeah.
I would, if we can, I'd like to see some type of a condition that fence must remain, even if they choose to do a fence around
Oh,
the pool.
absolutely, yeah.
It's not at the option of the homeowner, and I don't know what the building code says about that.
We do have a homeowners association on the property, so it's controlled both by us as the developers and the homeowners eventually that will be taking over the development, and any changes will have to be reviewed by the homeowners association at that point.
And your drawing indicates it, and you brought it up last time, a second garage that would possibly be in addition to the plan?
Well, at the time when we were having this discussion, and at the time that I went to the Conservation Commission, we had an interested party in the property, and they wanted an additional garage capacity. We didn't realize at that time that you needed a special permit to go over 3 cars, so this was the only way we could accommodate that person's request, and we went to the Conservation Commission to include that in their approval so we wouldn't have to go back. That person is no longer in play, so it's not necessary that,
So we're not considering that in this?
no, not at
Okay.
this time, no.
Let's see. Well, I think, thank you, and we'll
That
move
it?
on to, if there's any, would anyone else like to comment or have any questions from the public? All right, then I think we have first order of business is for us to determine whether or not this is a minor modification. Any discussion, or would someone just like to make a motion that we find that it's a minor modification?
I make a motion that we find the Morgan Farm Estate a minor modification.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, so we find that it is a minor modification. We can now proceed to approve with the conditions. And Abby, you had a couple of conditions there, pretty standard, or?
Right, yes. We recommend the 2 conditions that Phil had suggested for providing the certification from the structural engineer with the as-built plan and the documentation from the Conservation Commission.
Can we add that we're gonna keep, the fence needs to remain permanent,
Okay.
however that gets completed, whether it's through the homeowners
Okay.
association or through this document, but that
Okay.
fence has to remain.
Okay.
Any further discussion, or? A motion, someone make a motion to approve with the 3 conditions.
Well, we're approving, we found it as a minor modification. Now we have to approve,
The modification request, a minor modification essentially.
Changes themselves.
okay, I'll make a motion to approve the Morgan Farm Lot 10 modification to OSRD-EIDR Subdivision approval with formally said conditions.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. None opposed? That is approved. Is this a hearing? Do we need to close the hearing or no?
It's not a public hearing.
Okay, then we will move on to the next item on the...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 200 Nahatan Street, Westwood High School, public hearing for a limited EIDR public hearing, request to install lights at the high school tennis courts.
Hi, how are you? So I have a PowerPoint presentation that we'll provide tonight, and I'll ask Abby to lead us through that once we get started. I'll start off with some introductory comments about the project, and then we'll give you some background information through the presentation. There are extra copies up here if anybody would like to follow along. It'd be
Can you
easier
identify
than
yourself
seeing
for
the
record?
the screen. Absolutely. So I'm Nicole Banks. I'm the Recreation Director for the town, and I'm joined here tonight by Heath Petraka from the school department. He's been representing the school side of this project, and Mike Barry from Musco Lighting, who is the lighting company that we're working with to get the tennis court lights at the high school. So we're here to present for the Westwood High School tennis court a lighting project. The town and the school have been working cooperatively on many of our sport facility maintenance and projects, and we're proud to bring the project forward here tonight as it stands and as we'd like to see it move forward. The purpose of our project is to increase the tennis play availability for the school tennis team, as well as members of the community, and to also export extended recreation play into the evening hours. So we currently do have several courts in town. We have 8 tennis courts, 6 are at the high school, 2 are at the Downey. We do have court availability that is currently limited to daylight hours, so we do not have any other lit tennis courts. And so many in our community are left without the availability of time to play, or some to the weekends being available for play. In times when the high school tennis team is playing in the spring season, they often play from after school hours and then are finishing up on the courts right when it gets dark. Would potentially play later if they could continue to practice, but the daylight will dictate that. And then in those times of the season, there is no court availability for the public for after that time. So through the looking at the project details, we have had several public hearings, information surveys from the community. I want to thank the Community Development Office for their support in the project, the administration, both in the school and the town side, and all of the community members who've participated with us throughout the process, answering surveys or coming out to some of our meetings. It's been great to work with everybody. So I'm going to take us through the slideshow presentation, which will help go over some of the data that you have provided in your packets tonight. All right, so we start off with why are we lighting the courts, and I've already mentioned some of those items to you, but we do have, Westwood does currently exceed the industry recommendations for numbers of courts per capita, so we have a good amount of tennis courts for the population levels that we have here. But adding additional courts in our town would not necessarily result in increased play, as we already have an adequate number of courts for those that can play during the day. So what we're looking to add is additional playing time, and we get that by lighting into the evening hours and making that available. The total number of hours provided is if you were to light from dusk through 10 p.m. for all 6 courts. And you can see really a highlight of this is, especially in the spring and fall seasons, the extension of the season that you get there. We're going to see a lot of additional playing time available and lengthen our season there. And I already spoke a little bit about in the spring how that is important to our tennis team and then for the public following those hours. The next slide. Putting together our request for lighting solution, we had several goals in mind. We wanted to integrate with the existing control system that we have for field and athletic lighting, and that is the Musco control system that we currently utilize. We also had a goal of getting the best quality lighting for play, and this was from the perspective of both the school and recreation, what we're trying to get for the community and the team tennis play. Those items including maximizing light uniformity, getting adequate light intensity or brightness, and minimizing light spillage. We had 2 plans that were proposed to the town, and that included a 50-foot perimeter light plan where the lights are in the grass area right outside of the tennis courts, and a 30-foot pole height plan that required on-court lighting. We did take a look at the lower poles and found that putting them onto the court surface created a safety hazard for the players. Those would be in between the nets right on the playing surface, and also would create an ongoing maintenance concern that would be cost prohibitive in the long run, and also was a more expensive project to do that way. So for those reasons, if we go on to the next slide, we did determine to go with the perimeter light solution. And what we looked at here was wanting to get a pole height that would maximize the downcast lighting and utilize the fixtures that Musco was providing to provide shielded downcast lighting. And so with this slide, I'm just showing you how with a shorter pole height, you need to move your shielding and cast your light out further to get across the surfaces. We have 3 courts across, so we do need to be able to get to that midpoint. And when you do that, you throw your light mixture, your lights will go out further into the air and out around your project. And with the higher light, with the downcast and using the shielding, we're able to focus the light, get better light uniformity, better light quality, and less spillage. The next slide gives you an idea of what the current site looks like. If you've been over for a site visit, you can see that there is a forested buffer zone. Our nearest neighbor, we've measured that out at 225 feet from the closest corner of the tennis court to that property, and there is a forested buffer between there. So we've got a few photos here. The first is we asked our GIS coordinator to put together a rendering of what the 50-foot pole height would look like in front of the tree line, and so we've got that there on the first one. The second photo, it's a little bit hard to tell, but if you're there in person, you can see that there is an elevation grade difference where the tree line actually starts about 5 to 10 feet higher than the court surface. And the third picture is an existing lighting fixture, which is currently at the high school complex. That's the multi-purpose field with an 80-foot light fixture against the woods line there. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Barry. He's going to take you through what's included in your packet is all of the light data and analysis that we reviewed through the project to bring this proposal forward. And Mike is going to take you through some of that pertinent information and explain what some of those charts mean.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. Again, my name is Mike Barry from Musco Lighting. Just to give you a brief overview of the design that we put together, as Nicole said, we went through a bunch of different scenarios and tried to look at different ways to light these courts using different pole heights, different configurations. What we settled on was the design that allowed for high school to meet high school light levels and for recreational play, at the same time minimizing the impact to the surrounding area. We are using 50-foot poles, 6 60-foot poles, scattered around the perimeter, which you'll see on the other slides. Total of 24 fixtures, so 12 fixtures for each battery of 3 courts. Within this, you will see on the next slide, each lighting design for a battery of 3 courts. You see you have 4 poles to light those 3 courts. The way we have it set up as well is that you can actually turn on each group of 3 courts individually without having to turn on all 6 courts. So when recreational use and you only have a few people playing, you don't need all the courts on. We're installing push buttons where actually you push the button to turn the lights on. So they're not just going to be on every night from dusk till 10 o'clock. They'll only be on when somebody's there to push the button to play. That light level there shows you 50-foot candle light level, which is high school requirement. The uniformity that's required is 2-to-1 uniformity, which is just your max to min. What that is, just your uniformity coverage over the courts. You see your green is your highest, your red is your lowest. With a 50-foot pole, it allows us even distribution. Shorter poles, you get hot spots in front of those poles. When you can lift that pole up a little bit and aim it down, you're able to disperse that light to remove those hot spots and get even distribution. Next slide, again, is just the other battery of 3, same design criteria. Again, you will see that there are 2 poles in the middle of those groups of 3 that have fixtures on both sides. So that's why we get a total of six poles. Certain fixtures are aimed to whichever court they're designed to light. But the design criteria is exactly the same for both sets of 3. Next slide. A little small to see on there, but I think in your information packet, hopefully you have larger visuals of this. But this is the max horizontal spill. This is actually that measurable spill light level. At 150 feet, you are in decimal points. I believe the highest point was 0.02, which you can't even read a light meter at 0.02. Most parking lots are in and around 1 to 5 foot candles for safety lighting. This is showing at 150 feet, so by the time you get to that second row of parking spots, you're in darkness from the lights themselves. So again, we're containing the light spillage to within the property. Next slide is one that always seems to concern people. It's not actually the spill values. If you looked at the spill values in comparison to this, the spill is actually contained inside of this color rendering. What this is actually the candela graph showing the actual visible light source. So if you're in the yellows and greens, that is you're under 1,000 candela, which is equal to a 100-watt porch light. So a 100-watt porch light from your neighbor's house you could see for half a mile if you have a direct line of sight. What this is showing from that parking lot there or from any area, you look back at those tennis courts and you won't actually see that source of light. It's because of the visors that Nicole pointed out in the previous slides, that visor actually cuts off that viewing angle from that fixture. So this red color, the darker reds, is contained to within the court, which is where you'd actually see the light, obviously on the courts. And then as you walk away from the courts, you lose sight of that actual source of light. Again, this is if you are in a wide open area and it's just 6 tennis courts. This is not taking into account any vegetation or anything like that. It's just actual line of sight to that source of light. And again, what we've done with this design is adjust them to the best of the ability within these courts with this design to minimize that viewing angle of, obviously, of the abutter. So you can see it kind of jogs in a little bit in that corner because we've made as many adjustments as we can to get the 50-foot candles and meet the uniformities for high school competitive play. The next slide is representation of a project we did in North Attleboro, just with the same fixture. 4-pole setup, 3 courts. You can see this is with a drone. You can see a car in the left upper corner in the distance, but this is showing you how the light is contained to just within the playing surface. Nicole wanted me to point out that her courts were resurfaced last year, so this is not what your courts will look like. You want me to do that? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so in summary, we had a proposal to put together a high-quality light solution for the high school tennis courts. We've held a public meeting process and gotten input and analysis from many in the community. We have put together what we believe is the best solution for our needs. Allowing for the perimeter installation was a key point in our goals. Also minimizing the surrounding glare and the horizontal light spillage, and providing quality light uniformity for the tennis team, the community, and recreation programming. If you have any questions, lighting-specific questions, we can answer any of those for you, but that's
Thank you. Does anyone?
what we have for
I
our
have a
presentation.
question.
Thank you.
You say they could push a button and turn the lights on for the courts.
Yes.
How long do they stay on after that point?
So we'll have the ability to set that length of time. I think so far, some of our conversations have talked about maybe 45 minutes, but we would kind of want to see, you know, how is that working out for members that are using those lights, and we would have the ability to adjust that. So we want to give long enough that you can go out and play your game. It would also give a visual signal when it's about to turn off, and you could press it again if you needed to.
Is there a limit though? Like if you go at 9:45 and push the button, does it cut off?
We would have an override set into it. So again, it would give a warning signal visually and then turn off for the evening. It wouldn't be able to be put on past that time. We do also have lights in the parking lot right there. So for safety measures, you know, it's not like those are going to turn off and you're completely in the dark. You'd have a warning and then have time to get back to your car.
Is there any possible way, the buttons work to turn off as well? They were gonna leave, could they turn off the lights?
No, they will stay on for the amount of time that we set that on. The nice thing about having the push button is when nobody is there playing, then they're not on. So it's not one of those, you know, you drive by and you just see them on all the time, and we have to kind of say, okay, this season or this month we're going to pick to keep them on between these times. We'll actually have user activation. We do have the ability to control each set of 3 individually. So you could have, if somebody's playing just on one side of the courts, only those 3 lights would be on and the other side would be still dark.
Okay.
The way the controlling system works is if Nicole sets it at sunset, every day that time is going to adjust on when those lights can turn on. So the way the controlling works is that 10 o'clock curfew, whatever you guys have set, is the override. So even if somebody shows up there at 9:59, they're going to turn on for a minute and then turn off. So it's not during the summer months where they can turn them on at 6 o'clock. They would turn on only when it allows. So it sets that parameters within the system.
Okay. You also mentioned, we were talking 50-foot poles. You did mention 60-foot poles.
Did we mention 60-foot poles?
You did.
We did it one time?
Are these 60-foot poles that the light is gonna be set at 50 feet?
No, they're 50-foot poles that we did some evaluations at 30 foot, and then we did some evaluations at 40 foot. And 50 foot allows for the best uniform lighting design and minimizing that impact. So we never looked at 60. There's a point at which it's too tall and it's overkill. We're not in the business of selling poles. We're giving the recommendation that 50-foot poles is what's best to minimize the impact and design the best uniformity for the lighting design.
So no 60-foot poles?
No.
All 50, and you have a design spec in your full packet that shows it's a crossbar that would have 3 light fixtures on each pole, not the 4 as is in this one shown, but and those attached from the bottom of that pole. So that 50-foot height would be the highest.
No interest in solar power?
Solar power is not, you'd have to have either a large battery source to store the power for that, and you need a solar field. We do have projects where they're looking at offsetting the cost of it, but not tied into the lighting in terms of what you need for power to power these.
Okay. Thank you.
So I had some questions. I assume these are LED?
Yes.
And the hood,
Yep.
is that adjustable? Is it fixed? Or is it adjustable but fixed really tight?
It Yeah, sure, good question. So the visor is adjustable. That's part of what the engineering photometrics has factored into, where we're trying to control and create that cutoff. So it's tightened down where it's not going to move. It's designed to withstand the wind loads and that sort of stuff, but it is adjustable depending on the project and where those lights are aimed and such.
And if for some reason it gets knocked around by something
Yep.
and it's now shooting up to the
Yep.
sky or the neighbor or whatever, I assume a call from the rec department to Musco would
Sure,
correct that?
yeah, these lights come with a 25-year warranty, which means Musco owns maintenance on those. So if there's adjustments and things like that need to be taken care of, that's on us. But we guarantee and stand by the lighting on that we've designed.
Did Musco do the football field
Yep.
and the multipurpose
Yep.
also? I know the lights at Morrison Field take forever, seems like, to warm up.
Sure, that was one thing I wanted.
How do these work?
Yep. LED lights are instant on, instant off.
Okay.
So that push button concept is even better with LED lights in the tennis courts, where if somebody couldn't get over there to push it, they can, by the time they get over, they push it again, they turn right on. So there's no cool down or warm up like metal halide lights that you have in other parts of town.
Okay. And this center bar, you said there's 3 lights per pole? Is that what you said, or 4? You had
Three.
4 in the,
Three.
what about the ones that?
Yeah, those will have 6, because they'll
6.
have 3 aimed in either direction towards the courts.
And you mentioned you were outfitting this to make them suitable for high school tennis. There's some standard, I presume, that's what you were alluding
Yep.
to? What's the difference between recreational standard and high school standards?
Competitive play, speed of play, they have a 50-foot candle requirement for high school. Recreation is in a 30-foot candle range.
Oh, okay.
So they consider it less competitive when it's recreational, but depends who's playing, I guess.
I think that's it for me.
Any other?
I have one other question. You have, how many abutters directly through the woods there?
I'm not certain, Nora, do you know if there's I think that's the only one in close proximity that we've
Close
really
proximity. There are
looked
probably
at.
5 house lots that some portion of them touch the high school property, but that's the.
Notice
one
has been
house
sent to
you can see
them?
in the- Excuse me?
Yes.
Notice has been sent to them?
All about 300.
And how far to?
Nora, can you come to the microphone? Sorry, they're telling me that they can't hear you.
So there are several house lots that abut the high school property. Everyone within 300 feet was notified about this hearing.
And we know roughly how far to the dwellings, the houses?
So the best way to see is right here. If you look on that aerial view, you'll see that there is one house that's very close to the high school property line. And I can see 4 others, 1 to the north of that and 3 to the south of that, that are much further away from the property line. They're closer to Thatcher Street. There's one house there. The address is on Thatcher Street, but the house is actually built close to the lot line with the high school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask a question before?
Yes, there's now, if there's anyone,
What is a 50-foot pole?
could you come up to the,
Sorry.
so we can get
I
the,
thought I would ask them.
and just identify yourself for the,
My name's Tom Risha. I live at 141 Thatcher Street. My house is the closest here. And I'm up here to tell you a totally different story and prove to you what's been said. Very simple. Mike, what is a 50-foot pole from the ground to the top light? How many feet is that? It is 50. Is there a, I'll see cement casings above. So from the ground to the very top is 50 feet. Is that correct? Okay. And you've had these others. Nicole, have you visited, what was it? I think it was Dennis, and the other one is North Reading. Am I correct on those two? Have you visited those, Nicole?
No, I haven't.
You have not? Okay, just everything's been through photos then. Okay. I've prepared something here. I'm sorry, I don't know if I have enough. If you want to share, if I may approach?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks. This is new and out of my element, so excuse me when I,
thank you.
should have been ladies first, excuse me.
I can look on with these guys.
Sure? You guys are that close?
Well, While you're handing this out, I just had an additional question for the presenter. The parking lot lights.
Could you
Ms.
come back
Banks?
to the,
Sorry, I meant to ask this and I forgot, I apologize. The parking lot lights that are currently there, how tall are they? Relative to what we're talking about 50 feet? And how late do they stay on? Because it immediately adjacent to the
Right.
tennis courts, right?
So, the school department handles those lights, and again, those, I know those are set to dusk. My office is there, so those will adjust and come on at dusk. The same, they're approximately 25 to 30 feet in height. And what was the other question?
How late do they stay on?
I think all the time.
So that parking lot is lit all night long?
Yeah, that's a
Ostensibly
safety
for the
piece, yeah.
Security of the
Yeah, exactly.
buses and things like that?
Yeah, anybody walking around or, just safety of the property in general, if the police need to do a drive-by or anything.
And is there an easy way to distinguish what the candle power of those lights versus what we're talking about here? Trying to get a sense of what's going to be added. Is there an easy way to a percentile?
Typical parking lot is somewhere between 2 to 5 foot candles for safety.
And what are we
50.
talking about here?
50.
50?
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, thank you
Because
for answering.
Parking lots are, it's just for walking around.
Right, understood.
Thanks for answering those. So sorry to interrupt you,
Yes,
sir.
I
Would you come
apologize
back?
for that. I meant to ask that earlier.
You have it. I could probably answer those questions because after the last few years, I've become an expert in lighting, so, which I did not want to do. My name's Tom Reich. I live at 141 Thatcher. I'm in a butter, my wife and I, my family. You guys have some very important things to discuss. I apologize. It seems so minute, but this is my home. It's not my house. This is my family home, and this is extremely important to me. And we have been doing this for many years with Mike Berry at Musco and with Mike Gillette and with everyone here that's been going on. I'm going to bring you up to speed on a little of this. It'll take a minute or two, and I apologize. And then I'll show you the proof in the pudding here of everything that I've tried to highlight for you. We've had deals cut, and then what's happened here is that the deal's been reversed. I don't like, excuse me, I misspoke.
Well,
No one likes being treated that way. And so
I
I'm
think
going to
if you
explain.
could focus on what your concerns are on deals being cut, we're here to decide.
Well, this is why I'm going to tell you, we had an agreement, and the agreement was for 40-foot lights. You'll see this on email sent to me from the rec department, from Nicole. I've highlighted it. I think the second one that you have there is on the second page, that you'll see there that we all agreed on this. And I expect those people to keep their word. What does that say about the integrity of that office and of the people there? I have a deal cut. I walked away. They had 2 meetings after me. One, I was traveling, and the other, I didn't receive the email, and I'm not blaming anyone here. I switched email addresses. If anyone's ever done that, it went to an old email instead of my new email, and I didn't get it.
I think if you could describe how it's affecting you, because our job is to review the application.
Sure.
I don't know what happened outside of this, but
I understand.
we have in front of us now.
I understand,
what
but
we're looking at.
The importance of this is the 40 feet. I didn't even want 40 feet. I was at 30 feet. And the 30 feet, we went, and I did due diligence with Boston College. I've done it with Longwood Tennis with the professionals, and one of the women there from, she was the JV coach's, female coach's friend. She plays at Dedham Country and Polo. They're all 30 feet. And these are professionals, and all of a sudden we were at 50. We were at 40. I'm not happy with 40, but as a good neighbor, I agreed on the 40. We agreed at 9 o'clock at night also, and then the last time I spoke with Nicole, everything had changed because I missed one meeting here. All of a sudden it became 50 feet, now it's 10 o'clock, because now it's a town ordinance, you have to go through the selectmen. The 40 feet is very disturbing to us. I mean, this is going to be all over us. This is my house is going to be lit up in the back. I'm talking to you as neighbors and people who live in the town. You wouldn't want this done to you in your home. The 40 feet is more than adequate, as it says here from the engineer that the town hired. I didn't hire the engineer. I got it from Relco. This is very bothersome to us. I'm talking to you that I'm looking for 5. I want a unanimous decision of common sense that you wouldn't want this at your home, and then everyone's going to get what they have. The tennis community will be able. There were 12 recreation people at the meeting. There were 14 people in the stands. Maybe 5 of them wanted this. And one was the high school hasn't shown up to any of the meetings. The importance of it is you want the safety. The safety is there. It's been said in my letter from Relco, who did the football field. He lit up the football field over there. The engineer that they had signed up for, everything is adequate. If you want to tell me 50 and 60 is better, everything is adequate, everyone's happy. I want you to make a neighbor happy here also. I want you to do this for us as neighbors and people who live in the same community. In the beginning, I wanted no lights, of course. I mean, these people are going to be playing till 9, 10 o'clock at night. We were promised certain things, and I hear now from the multi-purpose field that's over there. That's much farther away, and I have lights glaring into my home. I've had no one come to my home to check it on this end. They're talking about photos. I would hope to due diligence after all these years, someone would have gone to the courts from the town and said, yeah, this is bothersome, this is not bothersome. I haven't had that. That's not treated correctly. The 40 feet, I'll get on board with. Nor did I want to. I wanted 0. Then I would go to 30 because professionals do that. I think it's an overkill on that. I want to keep the tennis community happy. And I want to keep us, I'm not going to be happy, but I'll be less upset at the 40. It'll be above the tree line. We measured the tree line a little north of 43 feet. I was been told that it was supposed to be 50 feet. We were also told that the first 3 are going to be, as they said, a button that will go on and off, and the other 3 closest to my home will not be. It'll be controlled by Nicole. Is that correct? Or has that changed? As you said, you circled around last time.
So
Am I allowed to ask her a question? Or?
Well, she'd have to come to the microphone.
Excuse me. Okay.
But your question is whether they're individually controlled or...
Originally, the 3 closest in Nahatan Street were going to be controlled by the players. The 3 closest to my home were not. They were going to be for special play in the evening through the town that she would control, so it would be less of a nuisance to me, and now that's changed.
So my understanding, correct me, was that they're all push-button controlled, is that correct? So it's the same for all the lights.
But originally it was not. That they were trying to keep, at one point until a meeting I don't show up at, because I wasn't aware of it, my fault of the changing the email, that this changes. I'm asking you as residents, I'm asking you in pure common sense to vote for me, to vote for my family and I's, and the tennis community. It's a win-win situation at the 40. No one's going to know that this 40 isn't that they can't play. It's more than sufficient. It's beyond sufficient. And this is what I'm asking you for. I don't know what else to go with. I can tell you how I've been treated with this. I'm very upset with this. But I'm not walking away from telling you that it's not obtrusive. It's awful. I'll be lit up. The trees behind my home are oak. So they bloom later and they leave earlier. I've got about almost 7 months without leaves there. It's like 5.5 months I have with leaves. Believe me, I know this because of this. But I'm trying to be a good neighbor, which we have been from day one, and I'm expecting the town, unless I'm silly, to reciprocate. It's very simple, but you can see they have told me we've agreed on 40 feet, everyone right there. I just expect people to keep their word and honor their word and have the integrity of this office in this town like that. Very simple.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Let me, we did an engineering review of this
And if
also.
I may say also, in the last one, it was from another electrical company who doesn't have the job. I don't know if they have the job yet or have to put out the bid, explaining how they've done dozens of universities and everywhere that in the 40, they do it at 40 feet.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you. We had a Beta Engineering did a study, right, or an engineering review. Phil, did you have anything to add to this?
So, yeah, Phil Paradis with Beta Group, we reviewed this on behalf of the town. Actually, Joe Bokoff, who also from Beta, is with us today. So, we reviewed the kind of the levels of lighting based on the Illuminating Engineering Society recommendations. And so, I think during the process, the levels were evaluated, and now they're classified as Class 3 for high school competitive play. And so I think our concern was similar to the neighbor here, you know, what kind of impact that are they going to have relative to the lighting. And based on the cutoff angles, and the, you know, lighting, you know, the focused lighting, we've seen that the lighting's gonna be, contained within the, I don't know, what'd you call that? The,
Footprint of the courts.
yeah, the foot, no, the angle, the,
The view shed.
anyway, the foot candles, you know, they go out, what, about 20 feet? Yeah, the candle, yeah. So, and so to be doubly concerned, we wanted to see exactly how high the trees were, and I think we discussed with Nicole, so if you can confirm, you show one, the lighting's pole. Yeah, all right, so that's, so you've rendered that pole on the left there, is the 50 foot, so it's below the tree line. And then the one on the right is 80 foot, is that what you said? So the trees are fairly high, and they do start, the trees behind the tennis courts are up at a higher elevation than actual courts too, so. So I don't know the mix of deciduous and evergreens, but we
What
think
can-
that there'll be a sufficient shield.
Can you address the glare impact slide, or just to, if I understand correctly, that slide?
The yellow one?
The one that's sort of the worst looking.
This one?
That's where you can see the lights from, and according to that, you wouldn't be able to see the lights from that house.
Source of the light.
Because they're pointed down.
And you'd see the
because-
glow, though, right? You'd see you'd see kind of the ambient light of the.
So, I mean, the lighting, in order to play competitive play, you have to have a fairly well-lit court. Like I said, it's significantly higher than the parking lot lighting. So there's gonna be, so from what I understood is that the lighting, if you're within the yellow, you can actually see, you can see the lights?
You can see the source of light.
Source of light. So you can see that there's light coming from the thing. Once you get past that, you can't see that. You can see,
Okay, that's.
Wouldn't that also depend on the time of year with the foliage? Isn't that gonna
So-
grow?
yeah, so because of the angle, this doesn't even take into consideration the trees. So,
Right, so if I understood that one correctly, like it's the same pattern all the way around, so it's not, it's not assuming anything about the trees blocking the light.
Okay.
Thank you.
so that's,
Thank you.
and I mean, there's, one minor thing of, there's a swale, that's stormwater swale. Just want to make sure that the poles don't impact that.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you. Are there other, yes?
When he had mentioned 80 feet on the poles, that's for the multi-purpose field. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that, and that the paperwork that I had given you are minutes from meetings that we had, nothing that I had typed up or whatnot, if I hadn't made it clear. I get nervous in a public meeting like this, that's all. All right, but I just wanted to make sure that was the 80 was for the multi-purpose and not there, and we feel the trees that we measured are less than the 50 right now.
Right, I think we understand 80 feet at the multipurpose, 25 to 30 are the parking lot lights, which are on all the time. And these are proposed at 50.
Nicole, could you come up to the podium, please? What I have here is the Recreation Commission meeting minutes from 5:15. One of the light items on the court lists that one neighbor is not supportive of the 50-foot poles surrounding the tennis courts at the high school. He agreed to 40-foot pole last night with Nicole, Heath, and Sheila. Nicole obtained proposal and engineering specs for 40-foot poles, meets quality of play with lights on 40-foot poles. Is that accurate?
So we agreed to review and collect information. We got all the light spec data on the 40-foot poles as well, and we did review that. And then we brought in Mr. Risha and met. Both Heath and I were there for that meeting. We reviewed it, and we explained to him how that would actually, both options, 40 and 50 feet, would have no impact to his property. As we've shown here tonight with the 50-foot, the 40-foot was the same. It did not reach his property with the light levels. But that on site, we wanted to be more, we would have better light quality, better light uniformity, and less light spillage for the on-site property. With the 50-foot, because we could go with a downcast shielded light fixture. So we were both at
You can't go with the shielded lighting?
You can go with the shielded. You have to tilt it out to get the light span to go out over your 3 courts. So you're going to have more light spillage than you do with the higher pole, where you're more directional downcast. And so we had both at a Board of Selectmen meeting and at a Rec Commission meeting that, yes, we did commit to do the research and review that item. We weren't opposed to 40-foot for any particular reason. We were happy to look into it. The 40-foot were able to be done on the perimeter, which was a baseline need for the project, and it could meet those. But what we found was that there was no better situation for the neighbor, and actually created less better light quality, uniformity, and more spillage right at the site. So for those reasons, we made the recommendation to go with the 50.
Understood, thank you.
So is it just a presumption, the taller the light, the more spillage we're gonna get? And that's not real? It has to do with the angle?
So, I mean, this particular shielded light version, if you go to a certain, the 50-foot was the minimum where we could really point it directly down onto the courts.
If you go back a couple of slides to that one there, it's simply a matter of geometry, where you have your aiming point that doesn't change and you have your pole location that doesn't change. And if you can go up in height, that allows you to direct that light at a steeper angle. There is a point at which it doesn't benefit you. If you go a 60, 70-foot pole, you still don't really get any bang for your buck. You're just adding pole height just for the sake of it. But in this application, to have a 50-foot pole over a 40-foot pole, you do in fact reduce that spill light and that glare, because you don't have that steep of an aiming angle.
The thing is that we're trying to get this light to go across 3 tennis courts. And so, you've got them coming in from both sides, and we need to have that midpoint where the light levels are highest to reach that center court be uniform with the other sections of the court. Otherwise, your eye will discern the difference in the play level.
I know it's difficult because every town is different in usage. How many times do you expect 4 courts to be used?
So we've had the discussion at our Rec Commission meetings, and you asked about the push button access. That was one feature that we really felt strongly that we put that in, so that it's when it's being used, it's there and it's available, and when it's not in use, it's not. Our idea is to start off with utilizing one set of the 3 courts, the 3 courts that are closest to Nahatan Street, and sort of monitor what the use is. We do think that we will have heavy use. Those courts are heavily used throughout the daytime. We don't have any data right now about the nighttime use because we haven't had that offering. So that's something that we want to, start off, phase in one side of it. We still have the ability to control the other side and still put in the push button access. So if we do expand to need the 6 courts, then we would put that available. At 8 courts in town, the total amount of courts we have, that meets the levels for our population size. So to have, 6 at night that's a good level of having adequate courts available in the evening for play.
Are there any other questions from our?
One more, if I may. I wanted to go home early. My recollection is different about coming back to it right here that you see here, and Mr. McCusker pointed out here. We agreed on this. I didn't type this up. These are the minutes from the meeting. Now that we're going to come back for 50. I didn't sell 40 feet to the selectmen. The rec department sold 40 feet to the selectmen. This is what their proposal was that I agreed on. I just want to make that clear. I just feel like I'm being treated unfairly here. And like I said, nobody likes to be treated like that. If it was your home next to this, I'd like you to think about it that way also. But I just wanted to point that out on the highlights that I put there and the reason behind it.
I understand now, the disagreement notwithstanding, you heard the explanation between the 40 to 50-foot height with the shielding.
I did.
You understand that?
I understand that.
So what she's
Well,
saying is you're gonna get more spillage with a 40-foot height light than with a 50.
Well, that's what they're telling me. The spillage, my understanding, was less than that when they told me in comparison to what they're showing me this first time. It was 10 feet last time, 5 on each side. This is my understanding of how it was. Nothing more than that. I'm the closest neighbor. Those coming above my trees would be, I'm getting hit by the multi-purpose field now. I'm thrilled now because they have a ton of leaves up there. I'm going to get hit from both sides now. I'd feel better if someone visited my home and said, you know something, he's right. You know something, you're wrong, Tom. You know, this is what we think on this. No one even bought, I abut the property. The rec department's right across the street. I would think that, or someone would have visited the other lights that are out there. We would all had honest answers. This due diligence was done. I'm getting repetitive. I apologize for that. But the points that are not my notes. These are the minutes from the meetings.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Well, my opinion, I don't think it's out of line to ask for a site visit.
I agree with that.
I agree.
I'd also like to see, I mean, we have the data on the 50. What does it look like with the 40? Is that data available for the 40-foot?
What I have here is when we were looking at originally, when we were looking at just recreational level, when we first initially started talking about this, and then we incorporated the high school level and increasing the light levels to that 50-foot candle versus 30. But this shows you kind of the difference in terms of.
And what about
So this is the 40?
And what are the lumens at that center of the pairs of 3? Do you still get competitive play lighting?
At this design, this is the recreational level.
At the
where
40-foot.
40-foot, you're going to have that light source closer to the edge of those courts, and so the uniformities are going to be higher than what they are on this design.
Yeah. But they're not going to be running tournaments at night. Will there be tournaments?
I mean, the lights that are on the football field that we keep referring to is a metal halide fixture, completely different animal, completely different application. For football, there's punts, so there is a need for light above the poles because punts aren't kicked below 80 feet. Tennis, everything is played below the poles, so we can aim straight down, the cutoff. Again, we're not in the business of selling poles. I don't need to push one way or the other. We're just giving you our professional opinion. Had the engineers design it, this is the reason that we're suggesting go with the 50-foot poles is to minimize the impact, the glare.
So I'm a little surprised with the 40 isn't a worse looking glare, right? Because you're saying up there in that diagram,
Yeah,
it
and
makes it look
that's-
like you'd be casting light way now.
That's a 30-foot candle design, so if you almost double the light level, you're going up to 50, that red is going to expand a little, the yellow, everything's going to expand a little bit more beyond that.
Right, I think his point was we just figure it would expand more.
Yeah. Again, we're on top of the courts aiming down. Our professional opinion is the impact is less going with 50-footers, and that's what we were advising on.
All right, well, it sounds like we have a couple of members definitely interested in going checking it out. Do you think we would go out there at night to see what the impact of the parking lot and the multi-purpose field
just,
is? We
you
won't be
know,
able to see the lights.
He's
out
asking
there
for a
yet.
site visit, that's the least we can do.
All right, let's,
Simple as it.
And I'd also like to see, on slides 6 and 7, I'd like to see what the lumen values are for the 40-foot pole. And then one more thing, if there is an issue with the lumens, is it possible to add an extra lamp? Like right now, I guess there's 3 on each pole.
It wouldn't be a matter of adding fixtures, it'd just be a matter of adjustments.
Okay.
Again, because you're trying to smooth out that hot spot versus the low spot, which is that middle court. So you're trying to make all 3 courts even, and that's what you can do when you
Got
aim
it.
up a little bit. You can aim across and get even distribution. Shorter pole, you're bringing it closer to that edge.
Believe it or not, we're not trying to make your job harder.
Understand.
So Abby, how would we want to set up something at night and Friday night football, Friday night lights, literally?
I mean, if you're gonna have, we probably have to coordinate a site visit. Usually a site visit, if there can't be any deliberation, otherwise it have to be posted.
Posted meeting, yeah.
Posted
I
meeting.
know, I think it would be a
So-
quick,
Be a
go
quick
see
walk
for
back,
ourselves
take a look.
at night, because I don't think anybody would have gone out there at night now on his property to see what it looks like.
If I may, if you did one site visit, I would love you to visit it without the leaves on it. If you could do 2 site visits, with and without, you'll have the best understanding of all, I think.
Well, why don't we take the first site visit, and we'll go from there.
Okay,
That's all we can do right
because
now.
there's 2 ways of doing it, because it's going to be worse without my understanding from the code. They want to play from March 15th through November 15th. Okay? But there's 2 ways of looking at it and being fair like that. But I just wanted to make sure if there was a site visit like that, if 2 would be better.
Let's set up, why don't we?
Let's set up one. We'll bring all the information available to us to bear on the decision. Okay?
So
We
you,
could continue this hearing to the next meeting.
your next meeting is September 15th, September 25th, so you'd want to set something up then next week or so.
That's fine.
Well, let's keep it,
Can I just ask a point of clarification? Are you looking to look at the lights in the multi-purpose field to compare those to what we're,
Right now, I'm just doing a site visit
Alright.
to see what I can see and how well I can see it.
okay. I think it's apples and oranges.
I
Okay.
understand exactly what you're saying about the different lights on the multi-purpose field.
Really the last one. Unfortunately, on the 25th, fortunately, my daughter's going to have her grandparents for the first time. Our daughter lives in London. I'm not going to be able to make that meeting. I don't know when I come back October 8th. I don't know that, you meet
October
every 2
9th.
weeks. I don't know how often you meet. I apologize. But I would like to be at this next meeting when it happens. So I don't know if you can accommodate me on this, but I'm letting you know in advance that I won't be able to make this.
Understood.
so October 9th, I think, is the next meeting, right?
Tuesday, right?
Okay, so I'll make a motion.
I
We can-
think,
Did,
I mean,
I think Mr.
I think
Gillette wanted to.
we
make a
are
comment.
looking to, we
Can you
can
come up
request
to
it to the September 25th meeting. I think they might be on a timeline.
Let's,
So I just want to provide a little bit of clarity on what's going on here.
and could you identify?
Mike Gillette, Town Administrator, and we've been discussing this issue for several years now. It linked originally to the elimination of the tennis courts at Islington when we had to do the fire station, and we were searching for a way to provide night play again and to restore that level. So that was in 2015, I believe, when we had that discussion. We have tried to accommodate Mr. Rasher. We've met with him many times. He makes compelling arguments, and we listened carefully, and we tried to find a way to mitigate the issue. 30-foot was eliminated. That was his preferred. He showed us examples of colleges and stuff. The issue is that you need to, when you do a 30-foot light fixture, you have to put some of them in the court. When you do that, you cut into the surface. When you do that, water seeps underneath. When that happens, freeze and thaw in the winter, the court would need to be repaired, often. So 30-foot was out, couldn't do it. We looked at 40 and 50. We would like to accommodate Mr. Rasher. We said we would do due diligence and study the 40 versus the 30 and hope that we could get to the 40, which was his preferred. That was a nice compromise. We understand that. In the end of the day, when we're going forward now, this is the third time that we were going to bring this to town meeting and then didn't. we finally did this past year. We had sufficient funds to do it. And we made a decision, Recreation's recommendation was, after studying it and discussing it, that at 50 feet versus 40 feet, there is, we believe, I know Mr. Rashev doesn't feel that, but oftentimes you don't know until it's in and you get to realize exactly. But we believe the engineers. And what the engineers have concluded is there is no difference on impact between on the light spillage onto Mr. Rashev's property at 40 to 50. The major difference for us, for the expenditure we're going to make, is that the quality of play or the level of play increases. We can go from just recreation activity, which is just, people batting the thing around, to a place where the high school can do competitive play on that field for the difference of 10 feet. And we believe that because of the trees and because of the angle, it actually has less spillage at 50 than 40. And so we don't feel that there is a concern. I'm going to say that I just think that it's now come down to, 40 because that was thought to be an agreement. It was we would look at that and we would study it. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to,
Continue to the next meeting. Mr. Resha, I've agreed to do a site visit for you. I can no longer put off the meetings, though. I can't push it off until you're there. Would you be satisfied with a site visit, and then we'll make a decision at the next meeting?
No, of course, I'd like to be.
I understand.
Do I need to be up there?
Well,
Would I be satisfied? Of course, depending on the result, of course.
Well,
But
that remains to be seen.
I prefer to be at this next meeting.
I understand.
I don't know how else to handle that.
I understand, but our schedule is going into it gets very dense, and we need to move things along.
I mean, I can send representation or.
Absolutely.
If I have to, but I prefer not to, and I would greatly appreciate it if you could make it till that October 9th. This is my home, this is my castle that I worked so hard to get. And for that extra from the 25th to the 9th, how much time are they gonna play at the end of this year, if whatever is approved? I would greatly appreciate it if you would reconsider October 9th.
Isn't there a way to video him in or something, or?
Yeah, it'll be in line.
I don't mean to be difficult.
We've had a hard enough time bringing members in from,
We're just trying to, I mean, he obviously wants to be here. And if we can't accommodate him that way, we could maybe do a video or a chat or something, anything, just to.
See, what I felt comfortable with was every meeting I went to because I could rebut or
Yeah.
speak my piece.
Correct.
I'm
And the one that I didn't
inclined,
go to,
I'm
they
inclined
came from
to,
40 to 50 feet.
I think it's important. The reason that we're doing this is to get all points of view on this, and so I think it makes sense to just go ahead
well,
and do it
I
till
agree with
October.
that, but at the same time, I believe once we go and do the site visit, then we're gonna make our decision. So, with all due respect, Mr. Resha, the fact that you're there or not is really not gonna make much of a difference at that point. We will decide what we decide.
It reminds me of a letter I got from Mr. Gillette, very professional, please. There's no animosity here or with Nicole or.
Oh, sir, we need, could you,
Yeah,
no, it's just
we're
because
getting the hook from the engineer.
what'll happen is when people watch the video, they just hear us talking and they don't even know what we're responding to.
Beautiful today. Mike sent me a great letter, very professional as he always is when we meet. And the bottom line is that it's, they're exempt. It's a school property. It's through the state, they're exempt for things they can do. And it's basically said after you read it, and we can do what we want. I understand that. But I need you to, yes, so
My
underline it.
point is, we are extending you this courtesy
I
of
appreciate that.
of the view. But once we do the view, then we have to do our jobs and make a decision.
The only time that things changed on me is with a meeting that I wasn't at, and that's what disturbs me. And that's what, I hope you understand that.
I understand.
And it's a couple of weeks, and like I said, I would greatly appreciate if you'd reconsider that, that's all.
I'm inclined
Why
to
don't
wait.
why don't we
So are
make
you-
the
I'm not here to
Are
be-
you withholding any other opinions or information from us? Because I don't,
Oh, no.
Mr. McCuster's point, we've heard everything that you had to say. Now we just need to see what
We
the
see.
site is for you to be there to refute, you're gonna say more of what you've been
Well, it's nothing
saying,
there,
and
it's
they're
here,
gonna
it's
say
just-
more of what they've been saying.
But I'd like to be at the next meeting, it's
I
important.
understand you'd like that.
Right, of course.
But
Why don't
may-
we,
may not be possible.
I think we understand the issue here. Why don't we just have Mr. McCusker go ahead and make the motion, and we'll go from there. We can always,
All right, well, I make a motion that we continue this hearing to September the
25th.
the 25th at 7 PM in the Champagne Room here at Carby Street.
I second it.
have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
3 in favor and 2 opposed. So the hearing will be continued until September 25th. And Abby will schedule a,
Yes, so I'll reach out to you all for a site visit. We're coordinating.
We can coordinate with do you think we can,
Let her, Abby will
Yeah.
take care of it and give us dates that work.
that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
all right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
Abby will
sir.
coordinate the visit.
Good luck.
She'll tell me the rules, too.
Yes, we cannot deliberate
We
on
won't be
that.
We-
talking with you or.
Can't decide how we're going to vote, basically. Like, we can go observe.
Thanks for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
All right, we already discussed the
Yes,
third
thank you.
item on the agenda.
Okay.
So this brings us to the fourth item on the agenda is 736 High Street, the Starbucks property. This is a discussion item to review the current parking layout.
Absolutely.
Yes, and Abby, first of all, Abby, why don't you tell us why are we here?
Just a moment. All right, let me,
If you could just, like, why?
So tonight is really a discussion item, but we did, so there's no action. The attorney for the property owner is here tonight to get some feedback from you. We did in the spring receive a complaint about the property. This is Starbucks on High Street, asking about the parking approval or concern with cars parking illegally at the front of the site, causing some backup on High Street. So I did review the planning board's file and found that there's an outstanding violation. Essentially, a plan had, or the parking lot behind Starbucks was expanded several years ago without first coming to the planning board for approval. They did then file with you, but did not complete that site plan review. It was withdrawn at the applicant's request at that time to come back to you with a more comprehensive parking plan. And then in the spring, I discovered that that was never followed up on, that was never closed out. So there is an outstanding zoning violation here that the current parking configuration never received planning board approval. So we directed the owner to file an application to close that out, but they wanted to get some feedback from the planning board first on what ideas you might have on how to improve. It's a tight site there, and we've seen the business has been successful, but there has been a lot of cars parking up at the front of the site.
All right. Thanks. You want to
So, good
proceed?
evening, everybody. I'm Michael Terry, Fidel and Murray in Norwood, and I represent the owners. Apologies from John Salvatore, planned to be here, one of the principals of the group that owns the property, but he got called away last minute with some personal business. Yeah, so as Abby said, so in 1996, this property was approved as a use for Starbucks to move in and open a coffee shop. And there was also a site plan review approval of the property at that time. In and around 2004, they made some changes in connection with the renovation of the Starbucks, and the back of the property was improved. I think there's a retaining wall was improved. And at that time, there was a new plan. But as Abby has said, there was a site plan review started but never finished. And frankly, no one's exactly sure what happened. To tell you the truth, I was the chairman of the planning board at the time, and I don't really recall what happened. But it was withdrawn and then just kind of got forgotten and fell through the cracks. All right, so that brings us to today. And complaints that have been brought forward are about parking and traffic flow, not really related to drainage or any of the improvements that were made to the property. This has been an ongoing problem at this property, just like many properties on Route 109. So the question is, you know, what do they do? They could go back and try to put the property back in compliance with the original approval, which was back in 1996. They could come back with the plan from 2004 or 5, which had minor changes, and tweak that and have another EIDR with you folks on that issue. Or their preferred plan actually would be to redevelop the whole site, which is what they would rather do, and something they're talking about, where they would take the building itself, create a new building, pull it up to the street, have parking and traffic flow go around behind it. I gave Abby a concept plan to take a quick look at it. This is our engineer's first swipe at it. But, yeah.
This
Can you
is
see
the
that?
preferred plan by the
Yeah,
owners?
this is kind of the direction that.
Could you grab the microphone while you're...
Oh, I have to walk off.
You can take those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so on the left is what you have here, obviously. The building off to one side, some parking up front and parking in the back, showing the edge of the pavement, et cetera. And the concept would be, it's a tight spot, but they believe they could do this, which is to move the whole building, pull it up to the street, more in line with what you're looking at now at the in the center. We're looking at the overlay district and pulling commercial buildings up to the street, parking behind. This would even allow for a flow through for a drive-through window, and have plenty of space in the back, and there wouldn't be people blocking the street and the ins and outs of the property. So that's the thought. We even, if we could, we haven't really gone down this road too far, but the property directly behind here is actually town property, and we'd like to have a discussion with the town about maybe just buying a little chunk of it, if we could, to make the flow better. But even without that, we think the site could work, and certainly would be a huge improvement compared to what is there now. So that's where we are. Happy to have your input and take it to the next step. And if you like, I have all the older plans if you want to see those, just for curiosity. Mr. Chairman, so these were the 96 plans. And this was the 2004 plan, which is more closely related to what's actually there now.
Let's see, did we have... So I think what we wanted to do was get a lot of discussion input here on this, and then recommend where you go from there, and get some, if there's public input as well on
Sure.
this. So initial reactions.
Is there a
from-
second business?
Yes.
In this
There's
building?
a real estate office in the back.
And how many spots
Concept
do
would
they
be to-
use?
I'm sorry?
How many spots do they use? How many of ballpark, obviously?
Who's got the newer plans? Is that the newer one?
Is this
This is the newer plan.
That's the proposed.
Oh, let me see.
Yeah, okay.
And
I would say they use these, maybe 2 or 3 kind of to the side. And I can tell you that I'm in here every morning getting my coffee, and I almost never see anybody in there. So I'm not sure, frankly, they ever use.
well, they may not
More than
open
one or
till
two.
9.
Yeah, maybe in the evening they do. I don't.
And so it's a one-story building with 2 businesses, and what they're proposing there is 2-story commercial building?
Right. So
Do they want to
the,
move them
so-
up?
Yes, so an office, like a real estate office, could go upstairs, smaller footprint, more efficient use of the property.
So this proposal could be considered under the FMUOD overlay district. So then the planning board, you would be the special permit granting authority to review this.
But what about the lot size of the project area? Is not big enough, is it?
Oh, let me see.
And Abby, what was the cause for that backup? Like, so were there cars waiting on
I
Route
think we've
109 trying to get in?
found, I think, cars kind of stopping here and
Kind of
blocking.
parked any which way.
They don't
In the
want to go
front.
behind.
Yeah,
That
it's,
feeling of,
They
I don't
wanna-
want to walk, so I'm going to sit in my car and wait for someone
I'm
to come
gonna
out.
stick my Land Rover right here.
I see no further explanations necessary.
We've all been there at various times.
So are you saying like the preferred option would be to redevelop the property versus just reconfiguring the parking lot? That's
Yeah.
sort of surprised
Uh,
that we need to
at
fix
this
the parking
point,
lot.
you know,
and it comes
they
back
are-
as we're gonna
they are open-
build a
I think-
two-story drive-through.
Yeah, so, I mean, that is, at this
Yeah.
point, that is the direction they'd like to head. I think, you know, the property is
It
certainly
would be considered.
ripe for redevelopment, and it's got issues, and, it's, you know, it always has.
It is allowed.
I mean,
Well,
it's a
with the
vibrant
new-
spot, put it that
The
way.
drive-through at 8 o'clock in the
It would
morning,
be special purpose ZBA.
That's,
it's gonna be a traffic jam
Or
down
special
109
permit
trying
from
to pull
ZBA
in.
If it was.
yeah, well,
It's a non-starter right there.
I think it's kind of what you have now, but with a
Abby, did you?
much
The,
less functional.
So it does not meet the lot area. The lot area minimum is 1 acre.
For a drive-through?
For the
For FMUOD.
FMUOD.
To use
So you-
the FMUD zoning
So it would require a waiver for the lot size.
for lot size. How big is the lot?
Half an acre?
I think this plan says 17,142 square feet.
17,000?
Special permit is.
44 is an acre.
In the overlay district, the planning board would review the drive-through. If local business, there is, drive-throughs are allowed, but that's a special permit from the zoning board. So if it was local business, it'd be a two-step review process, or combined as one
Special permit from the zoning board?
for a drive-through. It would also require site plan review from you if it was under local.
FMUOD, wouldn't it?
Then
Oh,
it would
was?
be,
Then it
yes.
goes to just us, not zoning board.
Yep.
My knee-jerk reaction looking at this is square peg, round hole. I see people parking there and then having to walk through cars in line to get to the building. And I just see, I mean, I'd like to look at it more, but that's my, you wanted reaction. That's my
Sure.
knee-jerk reaction is, this is a recipe for something bad to happen to a pedestrian, or it's Starbucks. There's lines. There's only depicted 6 cars there in line around the back. I don't know. I could see it easily reaching High Street. And then once you're there, someone does a bad job pulling in, the whole parking lot's blocked from High Street to come in.
Yeah.
That's my knee-jerk reaction to seeing this. It just doesn't look like that
And
works.
that is the configuration in Dedham on Route 1, on Providence Highway there. There's this new Starbucks that has a drive-through, so it's part of a.
Down by the Lowe's, down there?
It's a new one, no, it's
No,
right
it's across from
where Chili's used to be.
AT&T.
Oh, Chili's,
And
okay.
there's a bank and,
Well, I'd have to see if the measurements are the same, the driveway openings are the same. And it's a different road you're pulling off of.
Right.
Route 1 is not 109, and 109 is not Route 1. They're not completely the same animal.
well, what if you took the drive-through out of the equation and just moved the building
perfect.
forward?
Right, I mean, you know, we're not, I'm not, you know, we don't have
Right.
traffic consultants at this point, or, you know,
Right.
we don't
I
have
understand.
data to give you, we're just spitballing it at this point, if you will. Just, you know, the general concept.
I liked the start of it. I liked the idea of pulling it closer to the street and, not having that area out there for cars to be in. And then when I
Right.
saw the 6 cars circling the building, that was a bad visual. But
That's what it'll be
No
like.
front setback.
So, I mean, that was really what they're looking for, as far as feedback from you, is, I mean, do you like that concept? Not, you know, not necessarily the drive-through, but the positioning of the building as a way to try to work on flow.
Yes.
And rather than try to tweak what's there now and spend a lot of money on a bad situation.
Yeah, well, the way it is now, I don't see where you go from there.
Yeah, I don't.
I don't see it getting any
squeeze
better in any
more
way.
out of it.
You
Right, I
know?
mean, we looked at that gas station in Islington and trying to design some way to have cars driving in the front of it, and it's just not gonna work there. There's,
It's just too small of a lot. So, yeah, we've got the building position there, it's perfect. I I just don't see how we make a drive-through work. But other than
Okay.
that, it's great.
I have seen also large delivery trucks there, and I'm looking at that. If there's a couple cars parked, I don't know how they make a turnaround. If they're parked poorly,
Right.
Yeah.
you may have to back out onto 109, which could be problematic. I don't know.
Right.
That's just something else that just jumped to my mind
Sure.
as a possible concern.
Did anybody, any other,
No, nothing else at this point.
was there anyone from the audience who'd like to? You can state your name and address.
Ken Foscaldo, 35 Norfolk Ave, Westwood. I am the one that inquired as to the parking situation here. The problem that I recognized is the fact that I think there's space for maybe 4 cars in front, and there's typically 6 or 7 cars parked there. And what happens is it backs out onto 109 because cars don't want to go around back, and they want to park out front, and there's no spaces out front. And then you've got cars parking illegally where there aren't supposed to be spaces, and that makes it difficult to exit Starbucks. All in all, creating problems on 109. But the point is that there, excuse me, this has been in violation since 2004 or 5, and I think the violation should be addressed, and whatever's going forward for future is wonderful. I mean, moving it to the front and not having a drive-through, but everybody park out back would certainly alleviate, it would seem to alleviate the backing up onto 109. But it is in violation for 14 or 15 years now, which is significant. I don't know how that happened. Things happen, though. But it's time to address it.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're here to.
Yeah, I mean, Salvatore's own a lot of property in town, and they like to do the right thing. I mean, they own, for instance, a property across the street, the redeveloped plaza with Camellas in it. I mean, they're good residents, citizens of Westwood. They want to do the right thing. They're not trying to duck anything here, but they want to fix this
I think,
cooperatively with the town.
I'm just trying to think of other things. I think if you took this back and, you know, if you got rid of the drive-through idea and came up with a plan to have more parking in the back, there's other thoughts. Or I know there are concerns with people crossing the street. I mean, people have asked for crosswalks here. It's too close to the intersection really to do that. But there's also, this gets a lot of use from the middle school and high school. Kids are coming down to it. So I think any design should take into account the access, to have safe access from both the street and the trail behind it, because there's also the trailhead that goes back to the middle school and the pond and everything back
Right,
there.
the town actually has a easement through the lot.
So I would like to see a design that incorporates that and really makes it blend in, so that it's a walkable thing. I think moving the building forward is great. But yeah, like those cars on there, just that kind of defeats the point.
Okay. So do you want to set another date for status, or do you want us to just come back and tell you we're moving forward, or how do you want to take it to the next step?
I think the recommendation from
Right.
staff here, the process would be to recommend that you file an EIDR application like in the next 30 days. So this is really, how do we address this 15-year or so
Right.
problem?
I guess it depends on which route you want to go. I mean, an application to kind of close out the EIDR that was started in 2005 could reasonably be submitted in the next month. But if you want to talk about, if the applicant owner really want to consider these larger scale changes and filing a special permit, that would take some more time, and a full application and
30 days would be
drainage
tough.
report would be,
As
more time than that.
As far as, so as Abby said, there's a zoning, potentially, arguably a zoning bylaw violation here that's, but there is, we don't want to get down this road, but there is a statute of limitations to zoning violations. That's a 10-year statute. I'm not sure that enforcement would really be a feasible route. We don't really want to have that fight anyways. We want to work cooperatively with the town and remedy
Under
the
that, guys,
situation.
what would our options be if we were gonna attack the violation? Closing the business?
I don't, that doesn't seem like, we're here
know
to
if
fix it
it's-
going
yeah.
forward. I don't,
I agree 100%, but I mean, the talk is, you know, we have no other options other than closing the site, correct? And that's really just not an
No,
option.
I don't think we
it's
do
not
that. I
up to
mean,
this board to do that.
right. I think
That's not in our purview to
I think they
shut a
could,
business down.
I mean, they could they could reapply and without moving the building,
in just
present us with a plan that,
is really in its current configuration, and then that
Yeah.
could be reviewed by you.
And we can determine if we think it's gonna work. We have 14 years of evidence to see whether it works or not. But those are your options. Submit it, see if it works with this board, or file under an FMUOD.
And I guess, the point of the new plan is they don't see the point of wasting time, with an EIDR for what's already there, to then just knock down the building.
Which I don't see how you get approved.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and it's a problematic
Yeah.
site that wouldn't probably pass muster with your EIDR.
So if they're inclined, if the owners are inclined to refile under FMUOD and redevelop this, I would recommend you go that route. And we'd be happy to hear whatever you have to propose
Right.
to rebuild on that site.
Okay.
is that the only option, though? I mean, couldn't they just do, if they did not want to take advantage of the FMUOD, they could just file for site plan review?
Right,
of,
under the local business zoning, yeah.
Yeah, but what are they gonna file? The
would
same
be the
drawing
same
that
drawing,
that's being.
No, they could move the building,
They
they could do
could-
Right,
all
they-
that
Oh, if they
stuff.
move the
Yeah.
building.
The only
Yeah.
advantage I see for the FMUOD is to get the additional uses and things in the residential and that kind of stuff.
Or
Yeah,
the
was it-
flexibility on the setbacks, and then you could consider a drive-through at the same time, if that's what the applicant was proposing. There's more flexibility in you looking at the dimensional setbacks than under the overlay, the planning board would review the whole project. If they chose to go local business, the proposed uses are still allowed, but the drive-through, if there's a drive-through, would need to be reviewed by the zoning board.
So you have two options,
Got it.
you know?
Yes.
Take it, you know.
Okay, well,
So do
that's
we
great.
have to
Well,
close this?
thanks for your input. I mean, we wanted to at least
Not
tell you
here.
what was going on here, because we knew it had been raised as an issue, and let you know
Mr.
that.
Fiscaldo, did you have a follow-up? Thank you.
There's been a violation since 2005. It was incumbent upon the owner to come back to the board and close it out, and it didn't happen. Whether they go with a new development, I think the least that can be done is to file a new parking plan that will hopefully alleviate the backup onto 109 somewhat, rather than continue to endure that. 15 years is a long time, and, I don't want to see it spread out another 6 months or a year or two. It should be addressed. I don't want to see the business shut down. That's not at all. But you had a plan for parking that you just never came back with to tweak after you were tweaking it. Why not just follow through on it, and hopefully it will alleviate things, and then there's no pressure to do whatever you want to do in the future. But to leave it as is a wrong that continues to be wrong.
Thank you.
I mean, the planning board could impose reasonable conditions for an EIDR of the same layout, I don't know, possibly additional signage or kind of the business patrolling the parking spaces out front.
We could just take the parking spots out front away.
They would just still need to meet the minimum parking requirements, which.
That's just gonna create a huge hardship for their business.
In our view,
Well, but
it doesn't
that's-
matter how you stripe the lot. I mean, the way
Yeah,
I've heard it
people
is
are gonna-
the
and they're already
the
doing
mice are
it.
going to figure out the maze.
True.
And-
Well, but I think, if, for example, if you adjusted I don't know how many spaces there are, and but if you took away the spaces and filled it with grass, and you made it impossible to park there. I mean, the problem is that people are parking in front, and then it backs up and it's a mess. And also, like, it looks like there's only, what, 3 or 4 spaces technically, but I've seen 6 or 7 cars parked out Saturday morning. So if you make it impossible to park there, that's another way to approach it. Now, it might fail for other reasons, though.
Would
Right.
that make them in violation for number of spaces?
They need to have, according to this plan, is 24 spaces are required. And
For the
this-
building or just the Starbucks? Because there's a real estate office too.
Right, so I guess we'd have to double check those numbers today. But from the plan that was filed back in 2005, it was, what they were proposing just met the parking requirements.
So losing those 4 in front, even
Would be
temporarily.
a problem for zoning.
Yeah. So that's not a solution we can
But I
propose on
think
that.
the plan, the proposed plan.
You have to come to the microphone, Mr. Fiscaldo, sorry.
I believe the proposed plan back then that was never brought back still had a few spots out front, but not as many as cars are parking there. So
Right.
that, if it was 24 then and it's 24 now, I don't think it would fall below the required amount of parking. Just to go back to at least that plan to prevent so many cars from parking and blocking the exit there.
Right, I think back in 2005, the planning board was getting close to approving that 2005 approval, but I think there were some, at least according to the minutes, there were some questions about drainage or what additional measures they could take, and that's when the applicant requested to withdraw. But it looked like what's there today and what was proposed back in 2005 was close to being approved by the planning board at that time.
So just, I mean, we don't really have it's not a hearing, there's no motion here, but it seems to me like we should come up with something in the short term, like, or some, at least I was hoping to see, this is kind of like, here's the way it is, and here's what happens if we redevelop the property, which is clearly not something that can happen in 30 days. So if we had I think in the next month or so, I'd like to see what could you do that would conform, what could we approve originally and get it into compliance, but not on the hope that there would be a big redevelopment, because then we'll just be kicking it down the road.
And again, we don't think there's really anything we could kind of do. I mean, the way, as Abby said, it was about to be approved. The lots that are on the plan are the ones that are striped now. We can't control how people actually park and drive unless we have a cop out there, every day. So my point was, I think we don't want to waste a lot of time and money and energy on tweaking something that it's not going to be tweaked very far.
So just so I understand, Chris, what I'm looking at says 2004. It's got a stamp on it or somewhere on there. What differs from the 4 lots, 6, I guess technically, there's 2 on the side, the landscape area. What I'm looking at here and what exists now?
Essentially no difference.
There's no difference. So
There is a
if we
difference.
approve, what do you think the difference is?
The difference, can you put the other slide up? Or was it gonna go? There's 2 spots here. There's typically 3 or 4 cars parked here.
I get that. I'm talking about striping.
Yeah.
I know what happens.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
talking about
If
what,
they just leave
Right.
dirt there, they're gonna park on it.
So
So all
you-
I'm saying is if they put a curbing or something there, so cars couldn't park there. I mean,
And
when
if
you
you
say
go-
there's no difference
Planting.
between what you would propose and what's happening there today, there's a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, if you
yeah,
go
no,
back
I
to
wasn't talking
that.
about what's happening.
He was.
No, Chris, we'll go back to that picture that was up there of this. So this shows the spaces, which we all agree people don't follow the rules of that. But if you could
I count
enforce
25
that,
spaces in there.
then that could be something that would have been approved. So what will, so curbing or something to make it so that people can't park illegally there and that the cars can still get in and out. It seems like that's the logical.
Orange cones?
Or Jersey barriers
Well-
from
Or
the end of
something.
the one on a diagonal to the
I mean-
corner lot.
So we can see in this.
there's 2
there's
cars
this one,
parked.
there's that. Oh, yeah.
There's only 2 spots, and there's 2 cars, 2 illegally parked cars just in that photo alone.
You want me to ask them, like, put some.
Something needs to be done
structure
temporarily.
That says don't park here?
Yeah,
Or
and
order
Or-
of the planning board?
well,
Or permanent.
or just something like you said, like a Jersey barrier that is going to prevent them from parking regardless. Don't even need a sign. Just make it so it's impossible from there to park there.
planter.
I mean, why don't you
Planter.
just put a curbing,
Yeah.
a table and chairs in, I mean, a
Don't
bike
get
rack.
into that. Don't get into eating.
Yeah, I
outside.
just that.
Put you out there in a lawn chair and you get free coffee.
It's not-
So that's, I think, we're not expecting that you would go in 30 days and come back with, an FMUOD super development, but
You have to get Starbucks in the village.
here was a design. It has been, we know that it won't work that people are going to park illegally, so what's the best effort to solve that problem? Isn't there some design that can do that? I mean, I can't imagine that putting curbing in or doing something creative with that hardscape there would at least give us something we could discuss and perhaps get this in compliance and then move on to what other future possibilities could be. Because it would be nice to move that building up and do
Yeah.
lots of things with it.
I agree. All right, let me put my head together with my client and see if we come up with something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that's the next item, Abby, is the zoning amendments.
Right, so,
First, I would ask, do we have any additional information about town meeting? Like, that's the selectmen are.
right, at
just
the
said that.
selectmen meeting next week on September 11th, where I think they'll make a decision about town meeting. I did draft, a draft request to the Board of Selectmen in your packet, based on your discussion from the last meeting. Since we don't know yet if there would be a fall town meeting, but generally, fall town meeting is not always a given. The annual town meeting in the spring is, the definite. So at this time, your request is always if there's going to be a fall town meeting. So I had listed the three that were not approved back in last fall. So the exact same articles that were not approved. And then Articles 4 and 5 in here were two that you talked about the last couple meetings, clarifying language about the lots that are split zoned, and then the height of the fences. And then two others that you had started to talk about but kind of hadn't completed the discussion. I would suggest continuing that discussion until the spring. That would be about the parking, I guess, looking at the parking garages on residential four more car garages, special permit with the zoning board, and clarifying that language, whether it's about the garage or the storage of the vehicles for residential properties, and the language on the non-conforming uses. And then any other ones that you may have not completed talking about, to continue those discussions until later in the fall to submit for the spring town meeting.
So I think our action is essentially, do we approve of this memo? It's really, we're not writing the articles now. We're just informing the selectmen that this is what.
Right. So right now, to the selectmen, you would need to submit the 1-2 sentences placeholders for the warrant.
Has everyone read this memo, and are we missing anything? Or we did discuss this at the last meeting. This is kind of, have we?
Yeah, we picked through the
Reset.
last meeting.
Any questions, any concerns? Maybe just vote to approve this memo.
I make a motion, we approve this memo. For the zoning amendments for possible fall town meeting.
I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's passed. I think that, Abby, we had talked a little bit about at our last meeting, we voted against the resident petition article, or not petition,
Or-
but the resident suggestions.
Right.
And I think that you were talking about it, and we did not really give reasons for that, which we should have provided a guidance, because if we don't support something and a resident then brings a petition article and we still don't support it, goes to town meeting, it's voted down, it's barred for 2 years from coming back. And so it's important that we give our reasons so that the residents can
Right.
possibly change the article or just know what the heck
Right.
why we're rejecting things. So I think you have some response or.
Right, and also any zoning amendments, whether it comes from the planning board or another entity or a resident petition, the planning board always has to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the Finance and Warrant Commission and to town meeting. So you should be, when you are considering zoning requests, you should say your reasoning, because you will be asked to make a recommendation. So at the last meeting, it sounded like you weren't in support of the suggested zoning changes. This was relative to the, or not all of you. Some of you were, some mixed. This was about reducing the height of the buildings in the FMUOD 6 and 7, that's Washington High Street, from 36 to 29 feet. Also reducing the, increasing the front setbacks and the side and rear setbacks. And then also there was a request to reduce the percentage of the residential that was allowed. I drafted, I think it was yesterday, a response in keeping what I've heard at past meetings and from past discussions that the planning board has had over the last several years when you're creating the overlay district. Generally that it's those setbacks were carefully considered and those dimensional requirements at that time to be consistent with the purpose of the overlay, which is to allow some flexibility on a case-by-case basis during the special permits planning board review, to allow flexibility for the planning board to look at it. The 3 stories was important to encourage redevelopment and to allow that residential on the upper portions. Also the percentage of the 50%, 50% maximum gross project area was important because it's saying that you prefer to have the businesses, the commercial uses, but only with limited residential. So it is at that 50%. We have 33% in another overlay district in University Station, but that also allows for more commercial uses, industrial uses in the housing as well, but also the higher intensity uses, not just the local business uses. So I had drafted a memo if anyone had anything to add or to change to it. Or reasons to add. And then also that it was more in keeping with the village atmosphere, which was one of the purposes, to bring the, to allow the buildings to be moved forward, to encourage the parking in the back or the side of the property.
So I think that's what's in the memo. I think unless anybody has anything to add or detract, we can just go again. It's not like a formal, well, it is, it's just expressing the opinion of the board. So I guess if there's anything that's the majority on this wants to say, you can.
Does anyone object to what's said in the memo?
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't completely agree with it. I mean, but I don't know what the purpose of the memo is. I mean, is it to put on file? I don't understand why the memo is necessary at this point.
We haven't always in the past, but it's a clear indication if this were to move forward to the next town meeting, it would come to you again for a public hearing. So the recommendation from the planning board at that time might be similar. So it's really a heads up that that's what your opinion
No, that's
would be.
fine. If you want the memo, that's fine, but I
Well, Well, I can,
I don't agree
I'll
with
take a
all the
stab at it
content
here,
of it.
like, because of, so we said, bring us your ideas, and you're here, so, said, come to us first, is what we tell people. And so we heard the suggestions, and we didn't support them, and we were kind of split on that. I think we had like a 3-2 split. But we should do more than just be like, okay, well, it didn't pass, it's out of here, So it's, the reasons, as Abby just outlined, but in a nutshell, the setbacks, we want the setbacks to be less so that the businesses will be close to the street. That's part of the whole village idea. The height is necessary, we think, because of encouraging the development of these areas. If you make it too low, there won't be, we don't think there'll be enough development of potential opportunities of things there. And the residential component has been, kind of been through a lot of discussions on that and finding the right percentage, but it's a necessary thing to draw in activity, and we always have the opportunity on this board to balance that, but if we cut it down too much, then we think we won't get any submissions at all. So for those reasons, we're not jumping on to support this, and so that's fair, or that's the summary. So I think,
I thought I made myself perfectly clear.
so now we're on the record. So anything, are there any other town meeting issues to talk about?
Well, did you want to vote on the memo, or you voted last time? Is it still the same? I mean, I guess I didn't say, is it still
Vote on the
3-2?
accessory apartment one, though, or the, there was a couple of other ones we had discussed.
Right.
Have we voted on them, though?
No.
Okay, so let's, there was,
There's
what was
quite a
yours?
few of them.
Why don't you, what was your suggestion, and we can, it was two.
The article that I had brought forth was that had to do with the sharing of the square footage in an FMUOD district. It's already been used once.
Right.
It shouldn't be allowed to be used again. Then there was another one for, I don't have them in front of me, the accessory apartments being limited to, is it family members?
Family members was a
Family
suggestion.
members, and I don't know if there was one more.
The fence one, I think Brian had talked about the direction of the
Yeah, it's
fencing.
just-
Oh, the direction of the
Right.
fence.
So I didn't add those on because there wasn't a majority consensus. I thought you'd still want to continue discussion. So I didn't submit those or put them on the list to submit right now, but if you want to
Do we
keep
vote
talking
on
about
them?
them.
How does that process work?
Right now, you should be voting to what you want to submit for this fall, for
So
this
why don't
town
we just
meeting.
vote on them?
Okay. I mean, you're voting on the idea. You don't have to vote on the exact language, but you'll be
Exactly, yeah.
voting on
Just
what
the
to
thought?
submit. So I thought that's what you did last time, and it wasn't a majority. I thought it was.
Yeah, that's what we did too.
So I took
We
the
voted on
list
all of them, didn't we?
from,
We
yeah.
took one by one, and
And we voted.
I don't think we did
So
for those.
I don't know if with the minute, what I remember was that we did vote specifically on the resident suggestions. But as on the other items, there were a couple where I was like, well, there's a couple of people that are, a couple of board members were in favor, and let's keep it on for further discussion. That's kind of how
Okay.
Okay, that could, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that could have been.
So I don't think we completely
Right.
ruled
So
them out.
I guess what I did is I kind of took off from this list the one where there wasn't consensus from you on.
So why don't we, why don't we just add those back on as potential articles, that they were
So
an article.
potential for the spring, or, so I had, or at least the way I wrote this draft memo was 5 where you were pretty sure about, where you were all sure that you wanted to go forward, and then the, to be considered at a future town meeting in the spring, the ones that you were still open-ended on.
Well, are you
Which
looking
was there.
for some, for anything that possibly could?
No, I mean, you should be submitting, right now, you should be submitting what the board is ready to go forward
As a
with now,
consensus.
as a consensus.
And those ideas, we have no consensus on. I think there might be
I guess the
need for more discussion on them, but we still don't have a consensus.
I guess the bigger question, would we be prevented from bringing those up? Like, so let's say you give this memo to the selectmen, but we could still add things that aren't on this list because we're not in the publication phase yet.
Right.
We haven't had to provide notice to anybody yet, so this is,
Right.
when do they meet our last submittal.
Well, this is your submission now for fall town meeting, if there's going to be a
So
fall
this
town
is the
meeting.
deadline.
Right now, we don't think there is going to be a fall town meeting, so that's
Even with the
why,
other articles, though, that weren't approved, they don't want those to go forward in the fall,
They do.
well,
in the AG
Yeah,
zone?
so Nora, you can
Yeah,
offer
just to
some.
explain the process, the fall town meeting's a little bit different than the spring. There's a presumption that there's a fall town meeting unless the selectmen decide to cancel that fall town meeting. If they decide to cancel it, they'll vote that way on their meeting on September 11th. If they decide not to cancel it, they will open and close the warrant on September 11th. You have one shot at proposing any articles. You must reserve an article on September 11th, or you can't go forward with it if there is a fall town meeting. Springtown meeting's a little bit different. They'll discuss Springtown meeting in December, they'll open the warrant, and they'll give you about a month to put in articles then. You have to put in your articles between the time the warrant's open and the time it's closed. So in this case, for fall town meeting, you have this one shot. So
Okay.
if you're considering an article, you need to request it now.
All right, so in that case, then I think that we would want to have a placeholder for these items. And there are three of them. One was an article to address the reuse of the same parcel.
so this was related to the defined project area, I think? The
Yes.
project area?
So,
So it's a one-off. Once it's used, it's expended forever, even if the property's sold.
Oh. So what we discussed last time when we talked about these things, if I understand it correctly, you went through the meeting and we had less than a majority in favor of these, and that's why
I
you
mean,
didn't
I
present them?
don't, I don't think it was a formal vote, so I think you kind of went through the list. It
Well, I
wasn't
guess
you
what I'm
voted
saying is,
each one.
If you put this here and we have a fall town meeting, these are gonna be, unless we retract them, they're
Yeah,
going to
we'll
be
still
on.
have to
You can
vote.
always withdraw, yes, you can always withdraw, but if on next week's Board of Selectmen meeting, if they decide to go forward, then it's referred back to the planning board, and I would arrange to have a public hearing at your October 9th meeting. So we would get started immediately preparing for that public hearing. So we would start drafting the language. So we'd have to do that fairly quickly. So we would have to get that ad out next week, really, or yeah, by the end of next week or within the next 2 weeks, at least the public hearing, and then you would hold the hearing on October 9th. So you do need to decide tonight on what you would be prepared to go forward with.
And I
in the
mean,
fall.
I think it helps to think of this as its placeholder articles, because if you have 5 people, 2 people
But
should be
you're
able
talking
to.
placeholder, she's talking articles we're gonna go forward with.
If we don't-
Most likely go forward with.
If
So-
we don't offer it, if we don't do it now, we will not be able to do it at all. So if we don't include it in this list, we
In
will
the fall,
not
yeah.
be able to add it later.
But I don't support, that first article we came up with, I don't support that. So, to put it in there, I mean, I think we should vote on it then. I think we should have a vote tonight. And we'll decide what's gonna go in and what's not gonna go.
So you're saying don't utilize the placeholder method, just figure out now what we want to kick
Well,
up to the
The
selectmen?
placeholder method makes more sense in the spring as opposed to like this.
Well, it's just a shorter placeholder window in the fall. In this
Right.
case, it would be a month?
Right.
Till October
I mean, the placeholder window is smaller. It's about a week or two, because then you need to start preparing for the October 9th planning board meeting. But you don't have to, then you would vote on October 9th of making your recommendation to the FinCom, and then soon after town meeting.
So we have from September 6th till October 9th to think about what we're
And
doing
then,
here.
and then the FinCom's
we
public
submit
hearing
this.
is mid-October, usually around like October 19th or so.
Yeah, so
So it is a placeholder.
Can be used as a
Can
placeholder,
be
it's
used
not
as a
direct.
placeholder.
As
So
long-
you can
as
with-
long
you
as it's a
can withdraw on
placeholder,
it.
We're still gonna have a chance to debate and vote.
Yes, you would need to
Whether or not
have,
we're
you
going
would need to have a
forward with
full
these
public
articles.
hearing and make your recommendation
Okay,
to
then
the
I'm
FinCom and to town meeting.
And what does it take, 3 members to move the article forward from our, need 3 yes votes from the planning board to move it up to the
Yes,
selectmen?
yes,
Is
and
that
then the zoning
recommended?
change itself was a 2/3 vote for town meeting.
Okay. All right, so why don't we just, there were three ideas. Why don't you work it out with Abby as to
The other one
specific
was-
language. The second one was accessory apartments being limited to family members.
And what was the third?
I think the fence. the
Yeah,
side-
especially that could go with that 7-footer if we decide to even go with that.
Right, so right now, fences, you're not required to have them what direction,
It's a
you know, which
courtesy.
side. Most people choose to have the nicer side of the fence facing, finished side,
Until
facing outward.
recently.
And some, not always though. So generally we don't get into, we leave the choice up to the property owner. But I know it was suggested as, it could be in the zoning, but I was just, if you think down to would that pass at town meeting at 2/3 vote?
Yeah.
And I mean, you might get get some feedback after this meeting from people about that too. So it's, again, I think this is like, do we cut it off or do we allow it to be a placeholder and then we'll make a decision on it if there's a need to, so. So I would suggest that, so we approved the memo, but now basically we're saying we want to add these three things into the
So,
memo.
sounds like you want to revise the memo. So I should probably take out, put this whole list on there, so it'd be 7, 8, 9, 10. And then, if there is a fall town meeting, you would still have your September 25th meeting to discuss the language further, and then the official public hearing with you would be on October 9th.
All right, so why don't you make a motion to just do that, and then we'll be able to vote on it and
So it's a motion to approve the memo.
The amended,
Amend the memo.
So I make a motion to approve the amended memo to be submitted to the selectmen.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, thanks. Let's move on to the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
And so Abby and I talked to the selectmen, went to the Board of Selectmen about a couple of weeks ago, and I described a complicated plan. I got some feedback on that. In particular, one of the selectmen thought it was very unfeasible, that it would require so much work from volunteers. We also raised the issue of hiring a consultant. There was definitely interest in that. But in the meantime, kind of Abby has fine-tuned this description, and I thought it would be best if you just take us through what your outline is, and then people could ask questions about that. And
sure. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review what's in the packet. So we had talked a little bit about this in July. I had put together, and I thought there was kind of consensus on, I mean, there's different approaches. A comprehensive plan is a long-range policy document, and it's based on significant public input. It has to be approved by the planning board, and then usually endorsed also by town meeting, so that you know you have the support going forward. But it's really a written policy document based on all resident input. And there's a number of different approaches to how you get to that point. So in the past, we did, for the one that we have now back in 2000, we did hire a consultant to do the bulk of the report, really taking on the writing and the survey, and we had a steering committee. Usually there's always a steering committee appointed. The plan has to be approved by the planning board, but since the planning board has so many other responsibilities, you have other regulatory requirements, there's usually a committee of residents that are organized and charged with kind of spearheading the effort to compile this comprehensive plan. So we do not, right now, we do not have a budget to hire a consultant. The proposal that I had recommended in July and brought forward to the Board of Selectmen was based on a lot of staff support. Number one is because we have more staff than we had back in 2000. Was a recommendation for our steering committee of residents that would not be the planning board, but the planning board could serve as liaisons to really kind of help guide the steering committee members. And we had talked in July about kind of that number, how many people on that committee, and we were thinking in that range of 9 to 18, based on having those 9 specific subject areas, to have at least one person leading the effort for those individual sections. And then also we did request a consultant, a smaller amount of funds for a consultant that would help with the public facilitation portion. We're really thinking using them for the town-wide vision session. And this would be open to all subject areas so that there's a full discussion on really what that vision of the, for the town is. So I brought that forward to the selectmen with Dave in August, but then there were questions raised as the workload for the steering committee members, the volunteers, and would we consider hiring a consultant to do the bulk of the work as we did in the original plan. And then what was the other question? Oh, and how those steering committees would be picked. Now, if we went the town, the planning board we could go out for a consultant, but that would take a lot more time. We would have to secure funds, which would come from town meeting. So the planning board would need to make a recommendation to add this budget request, which is usually at least $100,000 to $150,000. We don't know that exact amount, so we'd have to probably go out to bid to get the estimate or quote so that you could bring an exact dollar amount forward to town meeting for them to approve that.
That amount is for the visioning?
No, if you wanted to go to
The whole
the
thing.
approach of having
Got
a
it.
consultant that would really
Quarterback the whole thing.
Yep. Consultant's not required, but they usually have access to more technology or experience working in other communities. They kind of create that third party coming in to help facilitate, but they would handle the bulk of the workload. So there would still be a steering committee of residents, but I guess it's more they would take on the workload more on staff's end. So that's a delay. So that's one point to consider. It would be a delay, but it's a different approach of how you would get to that end document.
A delay in time?
A delay in time because you would need to hire a consultant, but you could
You have to
only
wait
do
till
that if you
spring.
had all the funds.
Got it.
Yeah, I think even if we had a fall town meeting, we would still need time to figure out the amount of money. So that's what the approach I had come up with was saving money, saving the budget requests, but essentially would do the same workload. So I think maybe there was a misconception at the last, let's say maybe in the August Board of Selectmen meeting. The steering committee, we were hoping to find people that could help write. They would write just the
Heavy
first
lifting.
draft, and it wouldn't be. I was thinking of them as volunteer consultants, essentially, residents who know the town very well, who are doing this consultant work as sort of as a volunteer. They shouldn't be writing their own ideas and writing their own vision and goals and statements. The role and the idea of them was to help make sure that they do all the outreach and have the public outreach strategy and the surveys, going to focus groups, going to all the different, interviewing the stakeholders and really reaching out to people and then writing the first draft of their findings. Then that would also go to staff, the full steering committee, and the planning board, to you, before moving on to town meeting. So if you're on the steering committee, the thought wasn't that these would be the only people writing the plan, that they would just be helping lead that effort as a consultant. And question as to workload, it would be, it is a significant workload, but not as much as the planning board. I would estimate it would be less work than what you do every week. There would be weeks probably, in the spring. I mean, if you stick to that timeline of trying to get this done by the end of 2019, they would probably have some weeks where they didn't have much work, but then they would have weeks where they would have more work, heavier workload, because they would be going out to different meetings and talking with different groups, so they would have some, some work then. But it would probably be more spread out. I was thinking maybe in that 30 to 60 hour range throughout the process. The planning board, your hours, you have about 25 meetings a year. The residents on the steering committee, I wouldn't expect them to have that many meetings. They would be doing work of compiling information based on what they've heard on their feedback, and then they would be helping with that and attending other and participating in other meetings. But I think it would be more spread out, and it would probably be a little bit more than if we had the consultant do the whole entire plan, because they would be assisting with the writing rather than if we hired a consultant to do the writing. So the first question to you is your thought on the consultant, because that gives direction on how we move forward. So we haven't started looking for steering committee members yet, because I wanted to hear your input, and then we report back to the Board of Selectmen on should we move ahead looking for steering committee members now. That would be the approach without hiring the consultant for the full plan.
Do you know how much the consultant for the public facilitation would be?
We don't know exactly yet, but I was expecting under 15,000.
I'd say up to 20.
Up to 20.
So 20 versus worst case 150, and the 20 allows us to get going right away, and the 150 we have to wait till next May, and then everyone's gone for the summer for your public input, so you're really talking a year from now.
We'd be starting
You'd be
about next
starting.
year around this time in the fall.
That's true. I'm curious, so both of you, we've kind of, at these meetings, we've talked about the idea of the consultant. What are your thoughts on
My
that?
thought on the consultant is that it's a lot to ask the residents to do this, and residents come and go. So we could be prolonging this if we have to bring new people in. It's a huge commitment, and it's going to last us, this one lasted us 18 years. I mean, we want to make sure we get it done right. But also, too, what other towns have done it using residents? And what worked, what didn't work, and can we get that information to find out how to best utilize residents, if that's the route we go?
As I understand it, one of the reasons we hired a consultant in 2000 was we had no document to go by. They were creating
Right.
a blank page, and this is a
And
rewrite.
Abby, like how much of a difference between what you're proposing and what was done in 2000 in terms of how was that
Right,
consultant used?
So the plan that we did in 2000 was pretty much a new plan. We didn't have a comprehensive plan, or at least not a modern day plan that was relevant. So it was a lot of starting completely new. This round, it is an update. It is a new plan, but we have that background data to go from. So essentially, we have the size of the overall town. We have the information, the data that was collected from the last time, but that does need to be updated. But it's updated, but then we still do the goals and objectives and vision statement again. So it's
But
smaller
what role
workload.
did the consultant play in 2000? I mean, weren't the residents heavily involved in all, and it wasn't mostly closer to what we're describing now, or was it?
Right, yes, I think we had, actually, I think Nora was on the steering committee or on the updating committee at that time? In fact, there was about 30,
Was.
35
We had,
residents?
I think it was maybe closer to 35 members steering committee. We had a consultant that overall directed the plan, ran the visioning session. Don't recall whether or not there was a survey that was done as part of that. That's something that we recommend now. There were subcommittees for each of the elements, just like we're proposing. Those subcommittees were much larger. They included not just the steering committee members, but anyone else who was interested in working on that. So I worked on the Open Space and Recreation Subcommittee, and I had overall steering committee meetings I went to probably once a month for almost a 2-year period. I met individually with the consultant about a half a dozen times beyond that, and then I worked with the conservation agent probably twice a week on developing the open space and recreation plan section until it was done. The bulk of that was probably over a 9-month period, so it was very heavy involvement as a volunteer that I had done, but it was to create a plan where none existed. So what we have now is a plan that needs to be tweaked. The real reason you update a comprehensive plan is to update the data that goes along with it. And then if that data shows you that you need to move in a different direction because what you've been doing isn't successful, you make those changes. And then if your public participation process brings out new ideas about a different way to go, you make tweaks to move in that direction. So we have a very solid foundation. And if we have a steering committee, it doesn't matter which way you decide to go with the consultant to do the full process or the reduced process using more staff. Either way, you need a steering committee. Either way, I would recommend you don't go with a very large steering committee, that you limit it to between 9 and 18. 1 to 2 people per element working as steering committee members, and then the general public participating in all those discussions on the individual elements. So the consultant, the question is, what does the consultant bring to bear, and what is it worth? If the consultant is hired to do the whole process, then there is a lot less lifting on the part of the volunteers. That's without a doubt. However, I don't think in an update process there is that much heavy lifting. So if we go through all the elements one at a time, we have the open space and recreation element, which will essentially be the open space recreation plan that's coming to the board this fall, reformatted to put into the comprehensive plan. We have a transportation element that was already produced by the Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Committee and needs just a very minor updating. So we have the 2000 comprehensive plan, and then we have a draft update of that the Pedestrian Bicycle Safety Committee did in 2012 that just needs to have data changed. So that's almost done. Housing, we have a housing partnership working on a housing production plan, which will also then be reformatted into this. We have services and facilities, natural and cultural resources, other areas of the plan that are solid as they're written, and they just need the data updated and then any new ideas put in. So each of the elements of the plan are 2 to 3 pages long. In fact, a couple of them I think may only be a page and a half. We have only one new element that didn't exist in the plan, and that's sustainability and resilience that we want to put in for a plan. That needs to be written from scratch. The steering committee members that work on that, I would say, will have the hardest job of everyone, because it's something that they don't have anything to base it on. They're starting from the beginning. Whether it's staff or a consultant that helped them with that, it can work either way. So I really think the main difference is how much money does the town want to spend to do this, and how long do they want to take? So if they want to spend more money and if they want it to go out further into the future, then I'd say hire a full consultant to do it. If you want to do it more efficiently, more quickly, and for less money, then I'd say let's rely on our very knowledgeable, very involved citizens that are supported by staff and by the planning board. And I think we have a good procedure that Abby outlined for you over the summer and has tweaked here tonight. I think it would be the best way to go. I think it gets you a timely update of the plan and has the same level of public participation, whether you hire the consultant and wait a year to do it, or don't hire the consultant to write the plan, only hire someone to do public participation. The public input and the public participation is exactly the same. The standards are what they are. There are requirements for public participation, and they're the same either way. So I would strongly recommend going with the staff-supported, lesser cost, sooner time frame plan.
So who ultimately, though, once the plan is written, who isn't responsible for making sure it's
The planning board. So, for making sure that it all works together
that it's
and
worded properly and that it will hold up?
that's either, that's either the consultant or staff that do that. It's reviewed by all planning board members, it's reviewed by town council, it's reviewed by every department head in town to make sure that their portion of the plan is accurate. So that's what was done before. So even when we had a consultant on the original plan, still had to go through that process. The planning board was responsible for the final say. Staff had to review everything, town council had to review everything. And then eventually, it also goes to the MAPC that gives us their review, and they let us know whether they think it holds up.
Does the AG have to review it on any level?
No, I don't believe so, no. They didn't back in 2000, so unless there's some.
Different AG,
Yeah.
they have a different idea.
Yeah. All right, and it's only the planning board that actually has to approve it. But in 2000, we then sent it to the town meeting for endorsement, and that's strongly recommended, because when you have a plan that hasn't been endorsed by town meeting, it's just a document on a shelf, and it doesn't have any real meaning. By bringing it to town meeting, you get the support of the community, or you don't. And if you don't get endorsement of a plan that the planning board adopted, then that's a signal to the planning board to go back, take another look at it, and change it so that you have something that the community buys into.
And could you kind of highlight the checkpoints, like a sort of, again, I was concerned originally that it would be, I didn't want someone to go off and write the whole thing on their own. The process you've described here, I'm comfortable with now because, there's a lot of checkpoints.
Right, so I think, in the timeline that I had created was based on your goal of finishing in at the end of 2019. Now, it doesn't, that's not a deadline, nothing's going to happen if you don't make that, but it is generally recommended, within a 1 to no longer than 2 year time frame. Otherwise, people get burnt out, lose momentum. So usually within the 1 to 2 years is the recommended time frame. So with this schedule, we were suggesting getting started now with the search for steering committee members, having those members established and appointed in October so that they could get started in November before the holidays, so they could at least get started. And one of their first tasks would be to prepare a survey and get that distributed, have that open, and then a vision session in the early winter. And then also in that time, be doing the legwork of the outreach, public outreach, and collecting information and working on their first drafts. And then the idea was to start coming to the planning board, maybe one element at a time. You might have to have some additional meetings in the spring to have them present their findings to you. I was thinking, depending on your schedule, you might want to schedule an additional meeting in a month where you might focus just on the comprehensive plan. You might say focus on the housing and transportation element for one meeting, and then 2 other sections another meeting, so that you could interact with anyone who wants to come to your meeting. The steering committee would also meet, and then a final document would be submitted to you from the steering committee, and you would continue on with your review. And then around this time, whenever you're done, but around this time next year, you would be maybe getting started to move forward to bring it to town meeting.
Fall town meeting of 19?
That was the original goal.
And if we don't have a fall town meeting?
Then it would be spring
It just sits on a shelf
2020.
for 6 months?
Or you continue fine tuning it, making sure it's
The goal is for
updated.
it to be done for fall town meeting.
Right, or the end of, or substantially completed.
Okay.
Within that 2 years, I think would be recommended, and it would still be, if you were starting it now, you could finish it through the end of the fall, and then Springtown meeting starts at an earlier time frame, usually in January. This isn't a legal, you don't have to hold public hearings on it, but you could start the kind of public information sessions about getting the word out and preparing for town meeting.
And so the involvement from us would be to council as needed, and then as drafts are generated for sections, they would provide it to the entire planning board?
Right, so I was thinking the planning board wouldn't be specifically appointed as steering committee members, but to act as liaisons to help direct and support the steering committee members. You would want to be engaged and present throughout the process. So, also attending meetings, but I would recommend you allow the steering committee members to do their job, to do the legwork. So give them room to work, but also support them and stay present through the process. And then ultimately it would be handed off from the steering committee to you.
So however, the steering committee would come to us with a section, and that's an opportunity where we could say, oh, you left something out, or are you sure that that's, we would have a feedback
Right.
at that point. And then the workshop, the community-wide workshop is before that, actually, right? I mean, that's.
Yes, that should be before anything, any goals or objectives are written.
So just one point of clarification, the very first step before you even have the community workshop would be that staff would update the stale elements of the plan. So bring it up to
The data.
where we are today. So there are some things the plan called for that are done, that don't need to be in the plan anymore, and there are some things that were decided for whatever reason wouldn't be done, or something about the community has changed that they are no longer relevant. So the staff would bring it up, would provide a red line version of the 2000 comprehensive plan that would be the starting point. And then each of the element subcommittees of the steering committee would then wait till after the visioning session and then begin their work. What they could begin doing before the visioning session, however, is going out to do the research for their individual elements. So for instance, the housing subcommittee of the steering committee, they could go meet with the housing partnership, and they could meet with developers in town, and they could go tour the different housing facilities throughout the town. So they could begin legwork, but they wouldn't actually begin writing any changes to
I
the
like
plan.
that, because then when you get to the workshop, you have, it's not like people say, oh, what do you want to do about housing? It's like you would come in with having gathered a lot of information, and then you can set that up.
Right, and you have the data that you want to provide. That's the most important thing that's changed since 2000. Westwood's photo of what it is, how many people are here, what the demographics are, has changed since 2000, and you want that for the visioning session. So you want people who come to the visioning session to understand where we were in 2000, where we are in 2019, and then where we want to be in the future. The other point I wanted to make is that Abby's plan that called for the majority of the discussions to be at planning board meetings allows interested members of the residents to know when to come, where to come, and for those who can't make it, it's televised. So they have recorded sessions. So there's full discussion. Anyone who misses anything has a way to go back and look at it. Whereas if you have individual steering committee meetings that are independent, we don't have the benefit of WestCAV recording those. So they're not as available to people who can't make it.
And that's kind of like what I was getting to with like the checks, is that, so you have the visioning workshop, you have all these activities happening, and let's suppose that the group for town centers comes up with an idea like, we need to raise the building height to 300 feet, and we need to do, so then they come and present that at the planning board, and then we would say, you are wrong.
Right.
And so there's kind of, I think that's or any of these issues that my biggest concern was like, I want people throughout the process and say, I want to get involved, and then say, oh, well, you need to go to the right meeting. Okay, well, there will be a number of meetings, and then after that visioning session, which is a town-wide thing, then we have a check in terms of this board, we'll have a back and forth. But it won't be all done in these board meetings, because that would be interminable. That would be like.
Exactly. The work will be done outside those board meetings, and then it will be reported to the planning board. And the planning board and anyone in the audience who has any comments on the work that has been done have an opportunity to comment then and say, we don't think you're going in the right direction, or we strongly support that. But the steering committee members will be selected based on their ability to write the sections and their knowledge in the area of the sections that they're working on. So they'll be taking off running in between the planning board meetings. I think it's a successful model that has been done in other places. For an update, I don't think this would work for a brand-new plan in a town the size of Westwood. It would work in a small town, but it wouldn't work here. But for an update, I think this works well. And I think that we have a segment of residents that are very engaged, and I think that they have a lot to offer and are willing to do the work. That was the case in 2020. There were about 35 of us, and we all worked very hard for a period of 2 years, and I think the plan that came out of it was very helpful. So I think we'll find that again.
Will they post stuff from the steering committees on a website before a planning board meeting so people can review it?
Yes, so we have a comprehensive plan section that we're putting together on the website, and everything will go on that, and all the drafts, so whatever the steering committee members have for drafts, that'll be posted. We also had talked about using Facebook in a way to receive questions and comments. The board members wouldn't be able to respond by Facebook, but they could take those comments in and then respond at their meetings.
And I think that is another big difference from 20 years ago, and even 5 years ago, because these sort of the social media context has evolved now to, you know, it's, well, you can look at it either, I guess, many different ways, but we have a lot of tools available now, and if every piece of this process is done in the open, then it will be a much better process than what might have been done in the past, when there was, you really had to come to every meeting to know what was
Exactly,
going on.
and there were very many meetings, and you had to come to all the ones that you were interested in, and if you missed a meeting, you had minutes available to you, but you didn't have video, audio recordings. So I think by keeping the process as much as possible within planning board meetings, the public process within planning board meetings, and the work process outside of planning board meetings, I think you have the best of both worlds. The plan gets written, and everyone gets to have their say.
Thank you, Nora. Are there any other questions from anybody?
Just voting on members. So I saw the ad that would go out.
Right, so I had prepared a draft, if you had a chance to look at. I mean, our recommendation, generally, the Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority, and I would recommend keeping that approach with, so I drafted, I'd worked with the Selectmen's office to put in a kind of a brief ad, and then a more descriptive one detailing the role of the steering committee members. So we would encourage people to contact us to find out more about what this committee is all about, to contact us, and then also, you know, see more, what was it, like a 2-page summary of kind of what their responsibilities would be, outlining the process that we just talked about. So we haven't started putting the word out yet, but if you give us a go-ahead, and the selectmen at the last meeting on August 23rd, they had some of these questions and concerns, but they did say that, you know, we could start looking for steering committee. So the idea would be all of us, the planning board, can start directing people who are interested to apply to the steering, as a steering committee member. And then we'd recommend that the Board of Selectmen appoint them in October. We could also use Westwood Day. We could set up a booth. We've had a booth in the past. I don't think we did last year, but the previous years we did. So if you wanted to, we could we could arrange to have a booth, and then you all take turns maybe handing out little note cards or talking to people to get the word out about the steering committee and the process. So you might want to have a sign-up sheet for people who are interested in just coming to meetings, and then people who are interested in being on the steering committee. That's on September 29th. So then you could direct them to apply soon after that to be considered as a steering committee member.
All right, are we in consensus? Do we have a consensus to move forward?
That works for me.
Is everybody good with this?
Yes.
Abby, do you need anything else from this board, or you're going to tomorrow start?
Right, I would give the update to the Board of Selectmen, then I would work with the Selectmen's office to help get the word out, and we'd update the website and try to send out some material. If you all want to have a booth are people available on Westwood Day? Did you want to try to
I'm away that
do
weekend.
that?
I'm actually, at this point, 80% chance away that weekend.
I will actually be there. I'm not going to run the marathon that I thought I was going to do. So.
So you'll have plenty of energy. To,
You just run around handing out cards.
Ask me about the plan.
so we could compile information to have ready for Westwood Day, but start sending out material within the next week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to throw the net out.
Yes, so we'll
So
start
you get
doing
fish.
that.
All right. Then on the agenda here, were there any other items that respond to submitted questions or?
There was a question that I received back in July. It was specific to the survey for the comprehensive plan. On
Yeah, and I think
my response was, I think you just didn't get to that much detail yet. We're still talking about how to move ahead with the plan, but the questions are related to
the steering
people
committee will
responding more
determine the
than
survey and
once.
will use best practices and we'll make sure that it's done, that it's not just a.
Yeah,
Steering committee will plan the survey.
right. I was thinking the steering committee would put together the survey, and it would be administrative, and then staff would work to help with the survey. So they would work out the details and look at the different survey tools that are available. So that was the only question you had at this point.
All right, do we have anything else on this item?
No.
All right, then I think we're on to administrative items. So I think the rest of it
Oh,
is
yes.
things for you to.
Can I just ask, on Mr., was it Weeza that was here?
Oh,
Do
yes.
we all go together? And do we choose a date to do that, or?
Yeah, I think we should do.
Yeah, you-
Yeah,
we've
I would have to
done
coordinate.
site visits together,
Yeah,
typically.
You don't discuss items.
but no discussion. So it'd really be just going.
Observe.
So
to
will we
view
do
it.
that tonight?
Or
Make a
you could,
decision,
or you could visit on your own, at different times.
Go over there after this
Well,
meeting.
If he's not expecting somebody to walk
Oh,
up his
oh
driveway.
yeah, sorry, not on,
Yes.
not on his, not on
No,
the
it
private
has to
property,
be
but if you
arranged
wanted to
with
look
you.
at then,
You're going on private property, can't just go when you want.
right. Well, my recommendation, so in our best practices here, if you had a chance to look at it, I just put together, we would always encourage planning board members to visit a site prior to the hearing on your own. You can go and visit or, do a drive-by, as to not delay the application process if it could have been reviewed prior, or if you felt a site visit, if you could have some in advance, we could possibly arrange, we could have arranged one possibly to have prior to the meeting or something, maybe a half hour before.
Why don't you arrange a time in the evening on his property that anyone who can make it will go meet with, be there with him to observe, and he can point to things and whatever. And then we should all just go over there when we have a chance, because it's not that far away. Drive by there on the way home and see what the situation looks like at night and look at it during the day. And we should get plenty of information. It's not that hard to go to the high school. Not go onto his property, but just to go to the tennis courts.
Right, yes,
at
that's what I
night
meant,
and
to
see
the-
what it looks like.
When you get the application, staff and the planning board can visit the subject property of the application.
Right, but we're gonna be visiting the abutters.
So that would need to be coordinated, yeah.
All right, so best practices.
Right, another, Dave and I were kind of talking about how to move the meetings along. We could also, one suggestion would be for the vice chair to be the motion maker, or if you kind of, when the board's concluding their discussion, jump in with the motion. That might just help kind of move it along, and then someone jump in with a second. If you're prepared, I'll usually try to draft a motion for you to look over in advance, and then I'll update it as the hearing's going on with any new items that come in. So we do have some packets for you tonight to take for the next meeting with the new applications to try to review those in advance. I know we are going to be moving to electronic permitting, so someday soon, by the end of the year, we hope to be completely electronic, so you won't be getting the hard copies. But we will continue with the IQM packets that we're using today. And then also, if you review materials over the weekend, if you have any questions in advance, preferably on Monday or early Tuesdays, to let me know, just to make sure there's time to get back to you. Also, I know at the last meeting, I'm sorry I wasn't here. I know in the past this has happened too. There's what to do about if you have to recuse yourself. You should leave the room if you're going to recuse yourself. There's a recusal is when there's a conflict of interest or a possible conflict of interest, so you should really leave the room before the application starts, and then after someone go get the person. When you abstain, that's when you're choosing not to vote on something, such as the minutes, but there's not necessarily a conflict, so you could still participate in the discussion, you just choose not to vote. So that's the difference there.
Did you just say why you abstain?
I don't think, no. Just think you don't have to explain why you voted either way. But it seems like forcing someone to leave the room means you're not a citizen. You don't get to hear what's going on. You should go sit in a chair. I don't think leaving the room, I mean, you're a resident of the town. You're entitled to hear what's going on. You can't vote on it, you can't
Right,
deliberate
right.
it, but
So
I
if you
think
have-
taking a chair is a little more
Right, so I think,
reasonable.
I think
right, so there's, you could
we've done,
sit in the
Mike and I sat out a
audience.
bunch of things, and I
Yeah.
sat out some things like that. It's more like if
But
it's
we
something,
weren't,
it's a
we
judgment
weren't
issue.
recusing ourselves from the hearing. We weren't eligible for the hearing.
True. Although I recused myself from a couple of things, and it's, I mean, it's a judgment. I think it's a judgment call. Like if there's something that's not really a big deal and no one's gonna, it's just like then it's no harm. But the concern would be if I'm sitting over here and it's like voting on something that's abutting my property. Like let's say I live next to the tennis courts, and so I said I'm gonna recuse myself, and I go sit there, and I'm like, the whole time staring at everybody. That's, it's just easier if I could just leave the room if it's
Right,
something like
right.
that.
Well, you still have
I
rights as
think,
a
yeah, you're
resident
citizen,
and property
you're entitled
owner.
to be here.
Especially if you want to
I
stare everybody
recuse
down.
myself
But if you-
a lot for University Station for one particular property. I sat in chairs and I asked questions, and I made it very clear every time I'm asking questions as a resident, not as a member of the planning board.
Again, like I think it's a personal judgment thing. Like I didn't leave the room either because I didn't think it was a big. I explained what was my conflict was and sat down and all. So I think it's a.
I just think asking a
I'd
board
be
member
totally
to leave
safe
the
you could
room
leave the room.
is
Well,
unnecessary.
I agree with you, Chris, but I think some situations might be more volatile or more,
If that's what it is, that's what it is.
distressing.
You're entitled to do what everyone else is entitled to do. You're a resident of this town. Just because you're elected to this board doesn't mean you don't get a say as a resident. You might not get a say as a planning board member, but you still get an option to speak up as a resident.
I agree.
And I think forcing a board member to leave the room is a little too
How
far.
about we leave it up to the chairman on a case-by-case basis?
Or it should, I mean, it can be left to the individual, because, I mean, a lot of it depends on why you're recusing yourself. If there really is, for example, sometimes there could be someone whose company is an applicant or something, so that might be better to actually
Well, one of the
leave the
board
room.
members could be a direct abutter.
Or if you're a direct
Has
abutter,
some strong
then
feelings
you might
about
want.
that issue.
But
And you're negating those strong feelings. You're saying you don't
I think
count.
I
You
think
do
the
count.
main
You're a
point
butter.
here
Just to
was
be
Not as a
mindful
planning
of-
board member.
that it can be debatable as to whether you should leave the room or not, but it was, we shouldn't, you can't just sit back at the table, like if, and we just didn't think about this last time, Chris, I don't think, was just that you recused yourself, but then you stayed at the table, and so if people in the audience didn't know, and I forgot you had recused yourself, and I wondered why you didn't vote, so I think it's more of at a minimum, the board member needs to leave the table.
table, you can sit in the audience.
I'm fine with that.
So I had an interesting conversation with the ethics lawyer recently, and she said that when you stand up to give a comment as a resident, you're not supposed to say that you're on a board, because it shows undue influence, which is what we hear a lot. You know, I'm speaking as a resident, but I'm a member of the planning board or the, you know, Board of Selectmen or something. So that's something to think about too.
Right, it is similar. You should, if you're stating your opinion, you should say you're stating your opinion as a resident.
And don't even mention the board, they said.
That comes up
Yeah.
for this board more like town meeting.
Right.
Or at a FinCom meeting or selectmen's meeting. Those are the three chances where you might get up.
Or if you were just attending another general meeting in town, informational one, yep. That you can just be speaking as a resident, not on behalf of the
But
board.
I
So
think
you
that
just
it's also not even, it's not the ethical, the other element to that is just that speaking on behalf of the board. So if you get up in any context and you're a planning board member and you sort of say, well, here's what the planning board's up to, you know, or here's what the planning board thinks. Like, obviously, I don't think you'd say that. You know, we've been talking about this thing, and you know, we'd like to see more X, Y, and Z. I mean, that would clearly be out of line because you're trying to. No one is able to speak for the entire board except on things that we've voted on, or you know, things that have factual things that have actions that have been taken. So that's. I think it blurs into this idea of ethics and all of. If people are going to assume that you speak for, and then half the time people are going to assume all kinds of things, that you're speaking for the town, you know, not just the planning board, but the whole town or something, or whatever that means, like the establishment. And it's like, but you don't want to be in the position of like having people think that you are speaking on behalf of the whole board or something. Anyway.
Also, we've started working, I've reached out to our IT department, probably our legal department, to try to craft a social media policy. There's just a number of things that we should think about as I was trying to get started on creating a Facebook page, especially as we start the comprehensive plan. But we've had some advice from KP Law, had put together something recently, and there's just, there's a lot of gray areas, and one of them is, the biggest ones are communication or any discussion or outside of a publicly posted meeting. So a quorum is 3 or more, or a deliberation of board members outside of a meeting. So that's something to be careful of. Also, if you use your personal email account, so this is why we've created the town email addresses recently, so you should be making sure you're always using that for the town business, because if there's a request for information, there could be a search of all information that went to the planning board. So then your personal accounts would be just at least open to be searched. So you'd want make sure you're using that town email that we've created or established in the last couple of years. And then also, that's something to think about with your own Facebook, Twitter, and stuff like that, is that there's no subject to privacy. As a board member, you're considered an employee of the town. And then also...
So the personal
Yes.
concern, it opens the door, is the thing. It opens the door to everything else, right? If somebody
Right.
said, oh, well, he's using, and then it opens, so it's more of
The
a...
door is
Right.
blocked, and you have to open up your Facebook to everybody who wants to see any part of it.
Right. It's just not it's not clearly defined. It's a little bit open-ended. I think there was that case in one of the examples I gave you, where one board member commented on something, and then just because another board member was following it, that there is, that could be following the page or open to follow it was, could that be considered of transmitting information, even though that person didn't comment. So we are working to look at that consistent with the laws and create a policy before we go live with anything.
And just like, so what I'm excited about is that you're going to have a Facebook page for the planning board, and a lot of things that I would like to be putting on Facebook, you'll just be doing
Right,
that,
so
and I can link to it, or
I should try to be posting that information, so I would post that.
But wouldn't
I
linking
mean,
to it,
linking to it,
it would subject you to the same thing?
No,
No?
no, because you're an individual linking to a town meeting. We'll find out what
well,
the
that's why, so we
policy
want
is.
to, we're looking at, we want to start
down.
creating a board member usage policy.
It's a public thing at that point. I mean, it's, where it gets gray would be if, so if you just link to the agenda, I can't see where there's any problem with that. I would actually
Right.
think that's part of the responsibility. It's not like a personal freedom thing. It's part of the responsibility of communicating with the public as an elected person. But what if you put the agenda out there and said, what a load of garbage is going on here? You start throwing, once your opinion gets involved in it, or you say, what do you think of this? Posting it to a place where you know the other board members are. I mean, that's kind of what the thing it's so when in doubt, I guess it's like when in doubt, don't. Yes.
Hi, Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane, and I just wanted to make a comment in regards to all the social media gray areas. I think it also doesn't have to be on Facebook or that type of media, but also I know in the past there have been members of certain committees in town endorsing other Board of Selectmen via phone. So that's kind of touching that area as well. Employees endorsing Board of Selectmen before town meeting. So that could also be a problem, or people on a board sending an email telling them how to vote. So how do you,
There's a good, that
You know,
article, that law
there's a
article.
lot of that.
The article that you've had on the site which I shared on Facebook, of course, addresses a lot of that and the distinction between political activity and sort of board activity. So yeah, but it's all, the thing that I have observed personally is that it creates, it's very risky, it feels like. It would be so much easier not to, just to not do anything, because when you worry about it, when you do put something out there, you worry, how is this going to backfire maybe, or what's going to be the consequence of putting something out there? And then you say, why? Why did I even respond to something that somebody posted on Facebook? Just leave it, it's,
Sometimes it's nice to see the transparency. I know you've done a nice job, Dave, trying to explain certain things, and a few of you have as well. So I appreciate that kind of communication. But, there's other things, like I said, with the town.
Right, so the goal would be for transparency and distribution of information. So that's our goal. I was just trying to work on when you start kind of thinking about what consequences could happen down the line, just before we get started, just trying to get a little bit better handle on that. But the goal would be to share information. So similar to how we use the website, but try to get it in these different sources. Facebook, I know how to use. I would have to learn how to use Twitter and Instagram, I guess. That's the one with pictures.
Snapchat.
Don't look at me.
I'm not in danger of doing anything exact, running afoul there, I will not participate.
I've never posted that thing in my life.
all right, are there any other, so there are administrative items, what else do we have?
Associate Planning Board member position. We did post that. That's on the homepage of the website. So if you know anyone that's interested.
It's on Facebook too.
Oh, is it on Facebook?
The town.
Okay, all right, good, all right. I know the Board of Selectmen's office, we did send them that, so, okay, so it's on there. So it's also, if you go to the homepage on the website, it's really the description of the position and to apply within the month, so by the end of September for the.
That's when it
and then-
closes?
That's when it closes, and then we would arrange for a joint meeting. So we would likely have the planning board attend a Board of Selectmen meeting once, I guess, depending on availability of the people who apply, and you.
Okay. Is the other business, ZBA applications, is this informational or? do we need
Yes,
to-
informational, but I did, sorry, it was just today, there was 2 ZBA applications. One was for a sign. So usually I get a copy of the zoning board applications. If I have them in advance, I'll get them to you if you have any comments. So I had just drafted a memo today, really that the High Street one, I don't think there's any comments. It was the former,
Is it a replacement sign, essentially?
replacing the daycare sign with a new sign that's in a residential zone. So it's,
Marcy?
yes, the Marcy one. And then there's a proposal for a portico in the front of a house that extends 4 feet into that setback. And there was a question as to whether it was a special permit or variance, so the applicant applied to both. My comments would be, I think it would be a special permit. That was what we had written. If you remember a year ago, 2017, you did bring changes of this section of the non-conforming lot section of the zoning bylaw, and at the request of the zoning board, it allows provision for non-livable space or decorative elements to apply under the special permit if they weren't no more than 4 feet closer to the lot line, and that's what this application is proposing. There was a question from the building commissioner because it said 4 additional feet into the setback. So right now, the proposal is conforming front yard, and they're proposing a portico to make it 4 feet into it. I believe our...
Portico's gonna be 4 feet, or the building plus the portico?
The portico will go 4 feet. It's more than 4 feet, but it will go 4 feet into the setback. So 40
So
feet
it's
is
a-
required, and it's 36.
It's a conforming lot as is? or
No,
conforming-
it's still non-conforming. It's a non-conforming lot, but it is conforming right now to the front yard setback.
So if it's 1
So
inch
like-
short, it's not a special permit?
So the house is back
So
here.
why wouldn't they just do a 1 inch shorter?
No, that's not, it's 30, they're proposing with the portico will be 36 feet, when 40 feet is the setback. So they are going 4 feet into that setback. But I think the wording was construction of a overhang porch, portico, or similar decorative feature which extends no further than 4 additional feet into a required setback area.
Yeah, we specifically left that out of the variance.
Yeah, so I
For
think
that, to add on to, or to cover a porch or anything like that.
yeah, that's what I thought.
Did you say it was a 36-foot porch, though?
No, the porch
it's-
is bigger, but ultimately the setback would
4
be,
feet into the setback.
yeah. It is, I don't know, 7 feet or so, or I forget what it is.
I thought you said that. I was like, that's...
The setback will be 36.4.
Yes, as proposed. So my comments were just that it was, the zoning board has to make a finding that it's a de minimis change in nature and is
So
intended
it's-
to improve the aesthetic quality.
It's this, right? It's this, it's just the,
Yes, it's that front little part.
They filed a variance and a special permit?
Yes, because if it's determined not to be a special permit, they filed the,
Just in case?
in case
Belt and
it would be
suspenders?
a variance request. Because it was, the building commissioner thought it was, the key word was 4 additional feet. The word additional was confusing. So that was part of his recommended changes that we started to talk about on that zoning list, to just check on that language again. I think for additional, that word.
What else?
Right, so we'll send those on. Oh, that's all.
are
I
there
have.
any other updates?
Nope.
Nope. All right. Do we have to, you said the minutes weren't...
Yes, I'm sorry. Jessica did the minutes and I just didn't get to look through them. Sorry.
All right.
Next
I don't
meeting.
suppose we actually had the minutes from July, but we didn't approve them at the last meeting. But
Oh,
let's just tee both those up for the
Okay.
next meeting. There are other updates in the notes here, but nothing else. I assume there's nothing else we need to.
All right, unless you have something specific you want to talk about.
I don't. I entertain a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You're adjourned.
So these are the packets.